Hello, this video is a compilation of all of my Destiny retrospectives. It covers not only what Destiny was like over the past 12 years, but also my career covering the game and my career on YouTube. However, I have also added a brand new segment at the end covering the final year of the game. So if you have already seen the first 3 parts, feel free to skip to the new final section. Thanks and enjoy. It is June 2013, and I have somehow gotten my way into E3 with my tiny 2,000 subscriber Call of Duty channel that I had built up over 2 years, and with some television work credits. My first Destiny video has gone up, specifically timed to hopefully be rising through the YouTube search rankings around E3 2013. And as I wait in the 2-hour line to watch literally the exact same thing we saw in the keynote, I see weapons being flashed on the monitors in line and snap some pictures. These pictures alone would cause my channel to hit 1,000 subscribers thanks to the help of More Console, Destiny Updates, and a couple of others. More Console and Destiny Updates were the other big channels at the time covering Destiny. It is also around this time that I would work my final big job in television, although I didn't know this at the time. Some months go by and I prepare my mini-series on each of the classes and what we might expect from them in the game. This is also around the time where I received a community focus on Bungie.net, and those two things combined enabled my channel to finally start having really consistent growth. Again, I just happened to have great timing. I could also establish that I wasn't like More Console or Destiny Updates. I was going to be the MMO perspective to their hype and their news. I had the background, I had the experience. Maybe this could turn into something big. I continued to cover the tiny trickle of news that would end up spilling out until we got to the Devil's Lair initial reveal. I did a full breakdown on Devil's Lair, and that video ended up getting picked up by Kotaku, which gave me one of my most viewed videos of all time at the time. This was April 30th, 2014.
Oh, this is my life. This is the life right here. 2:30 in the morning, outside, at work. Recording YouTube.
This was also around the time that I started to look for a hardcore guild to be a part of, or clan. I didn't want to make my own clan because I just didn't want to be in charge of one, plus having to worry about doing streaming and videos. I joined up with the previously Xbox-focused Prime Guard as they became PS4-focused, and met most of the people who are still my friends and clanmates today, although under the now casualified math class banner. E3 2014 was around the corner, and I ended up getting emailed about coming to the capture event that was taking place. I was shocked at this invite because at the time I only had about 10,000 subscribers. There were people with hundreds of thousands, even millions of subscribers, and yet I'm going to one of these things. I was nothing compared to these guys. I remember seeing C-Nanners specifically at this event, and this is mid-2014, where he has just exploded in popularity the year before, and it's getting 50, 60, 70 million views a month. And I was very actively watching his videos at the time. And I just thought, how the hell did I get to end up here? I'm not even sure if I had 1 million views on the channel at the time. I spent most of the day freaking out as I wasn't sure if I needed to bring my own capture equipment or not, as I didn't have any of it on me, but Deej assured me within minutes of the event starting that they had capture stations and other equipment prepared. Very stressful day. The alpha was also announced at E3 2014, and I rushed out to buy a PS4 in the morning of the second day of E3 so that I can get home and stream a bit of the alpha, of which I'm pretty sure I got to play a day in advance of a few other people, drawing some good attention to my stream. I never really had to grow a stream from scratch, just the YouTube channel from scratch. The alpha and beta came and went, and the channel was really thriving, much more so than I thought it would. I had a big decision to make. Go full-time with YouTube, betting big on Destiny, or pick up on a job offer to work at a post-production house in television. The job was a big deal to me because I had wanted to be an editor, and this was a great first step. It was the first time I really had an entry point into post-production after 3 years of working bottom-tier jobs. However, I declined and decided to gamble on YouTube, going down to about $46 in my bank account before launch. I was again invited up to Seattle for the final capture event before the game released. I sat with more console for a good chunk of it as we explored through the Moon and Venus missions. And him and I both had a sort of uneasy feeling going through all this content. The first time, I really started to experience some doubts. Was this it? Was this the final game we were going to get? It just seemed so short, like they were hiding some stuff so that we wouldn't end up playing everything. No, this wasn't everything. They wouldn't give us this much of the final game to play before it actually came out. At least I don't think so. Right? Destiny finally releases. Unfortunately, what I was hoping was not true was indeed true. I did end up seeing a large portion of the game at that capture event. Destiny at launch was not what I was hoping for, not what many people were hoping for. The main campaign was very brief, devoid of any coherence in terms of a storyline. The core gameplay itself, shooting guns and killing stuff, was fun, but that was really all Destiny had going for it at the time. Strikes were boring. Where's the mechanics? Do all the bosses just sit there and do nothing? Why is this all so easy? Where's the difficulty settings? These missions only take a few minutes. I thought this was gonna be like Halo, a series of games I had never played but knew had longer missions. What the hell is even going on? Anyway, this Nightfall thing is pretty hard, but that's because we're under-leveled and the enemies deal 3 times the damage to us, but that difficulty quickly faded. None of this made any sense. The videos I wanted to make, going deep into number crunching and stat and ability breakdowns, just weren't necessary because of how simplistic everything was or how quickly things could be explained. Strike guides weren't necessary because they were easy and had no mechanics at all. The first video I did going in depth on a topic was increased melee attack speed, something that ended up being very simple and not that popular of a video. Bounties didn't need this video treatment either, nor were they really that vital to the initial Destiny experience. Suddenly, all of the things I thought I could cover in videos were basically pointless to cover at all, and my channel was in deep trouble. Then came the Vault of Glass, or as my clan and I knew it, a glorified strike, at least before it launched. Turns out it was the one redeeming thing about Destiny at the time. The Vault of Glass. And Prime Guard had boasted that we were going to get world's first to complete the raid. And we did. And my team got 2nd place. And we also got 5th place. Although, there was a disappointment after learning Atheon was the final boss. Only 2 bosses? What the hell is this? I would soon come to learn that raids were split not only into bosses, but also encounters, and the Oracles in Atheon Part 1 were considered raid encounters. Gone were my thoughts of Destiny raids being like WoW raids with 5, 10, 15 bosses. This was going to be much simpler and more casual, unfortunate for me, seeing as the thing I wanted to do most in the game was raid guides and raid assistance. I declined multiple 4-figure dollar offers to do my raid guides for other channels and websites because this is the one thing I wanted to do for my channel. This is why the channel even existed in the first place, and to take other offers would have been really stupid. This was not the Destiny that I wanted. I know it wasn't going to be a full MMO-like experience, but VOG and the gunplay were the only highlights at the time. We had issues like legendary engrams turning into blues, the Forever 29 issues that led people to make 3 of the same class just to get loot, a really bad first Iron Banner event, the rather lackluster Queen's Wrath event, the complete lack of auxiliary progression, boring as hell dungeons, aka strikes. I thought the fact that exotics were a little too random to get was an issue. There were so many problems at launch that I thought my YouTube career was over before we were a month in. I thought Destiny was going to be over before we were a month in. I didn't really speak about the problems with the game as quickly as I should have, but instead I addressed issues in streams and when things were getting fixed, like the loot cave. I kept making content on how to do this and how to do that, weapon reviews and guides, stuff that never really addressed the whole of the game. What was really disappointing is that we did have a roadmap for these events. We knew when everything was coming, and having these events start the Destiny experience quickly soured it as we realized that 1, the events weren't very good, and 2, these roadmaps would vanish as soon as they started. Vault of Glass hard mode comes and goes with Prime Guard unable to get world first, but we still felt good about our normal mode accomplishments. The hard mode was what I was hoping for at the time. The level cranked up, and it was the kind of struggle where you and your group were just bashing your head against a wall until you were perfect. You knew the mechanics, you knew what to do, but you just needed to execute because your gear and your level were so bad. That is what I wanted, although as we geared, execution mattered less and less, as it should to an extent. As time went on though, hard mode became more and more of a joke with regards to the world first chase. But after the hype of Vault of Glass was over, I started to look for a new job in television. The past couple of months had allowed me to replenish my bank account for a few months of rent, so I would be covered for a while during my job hunt. The reviews were out, and I was just going to finish the list of ideas that I had for videos while I looked for work. The mediocre feel of the game at the time led me to believe that Destiny would be dead after the Dark Below expansion hit, although my comment section would lead you to believe that Destiny was dead 3 weeks in. How could Bungie improve the game enough in the tiny window that they had to keep people playing? Things were getting fixed, sure, but it was going to take a much larger update to really adjust the issues of the game, some of which are still issues in the game today. It did really feel like at the time the game was tanking, and trying to keep my 5 videos a week schedule was getting harder every single week, a schedule that I would be forced to relax. The Dark Below came with a new raid, which was again one of the few redeeming things about the Dark Below, with an exotic weapon upgrade system that the entire community hated. I actually didn't mind it too much, but that's because I was very used to grinding stuff with my past MMO experience. At least this time around, we got a little story exposition, but the main campaign was, again, brief, but a slight improvement overall, with the Urn of Sacrifice story chain scoring some points in the community. The Will of Crota took no new strides in strike development at all, and for a while I thought was among the worst strikes in the game. The Undying Mind, while also consisting of a ton of enemies, ended up being more fun, but again, not really different. I remember very awkwardly trying to speak positively about No Land Beyond in an Activision interview at a capture event, the worst PvE weapon in the game. The raid, for all of its eventual flaws, was a good experience. The light and leveling system really started to show its weaknesses in the Dark Below, and in the House of Wolves just needed to be band-aided via etheric light to keep people happy while they fixed the light leveling system for the future. The experience of the hard mode raid being a cakewalk on the first day of release also started here, something I haven't really been too happy with since it started, although delaying the hard mode until bugs and cheeses can be fixed is technically a good idea. Dark Below maybe wasn't a complete drop in quality, but I don't know how much of an improvement it was either. With very little time to actually respond to the complaints of the launch of the game, there's not much Bungie could have done with this expansion to really address player concerns. At least that's what I told myself. It was in the middle of the Dark Below where I had really started to run out of ideas for YouTube content. It was also the first time that I truly experienced some horrible backlash on a video, the one about doors in strikes and how to fix cheesing. My word selection wasn't great in that video, and that video was misconstrued by my audience into something that I never intended to say. I would start to clarify my positions and wording thanks to this video. The custom challenge modes you've seen on my channel were born due to a lack of content during this time. I attribute the challenge modes to saving my channel in these desperate times, because without these, the channel would have experienced significantly more idle time. Crota's End was the prime time for challenge modes due to the encounters being really easy and allowed my teams to get creative. Despite all of my worries about the launch of Destiny, the channel was still doing pretty well with almost no change in subscriber growth. Views were solid, growth was solid, but I wasn't sure how long this was really going to last. I kept on my toes for work, but I wasn't looking as hard as I was back in November 2014. House of Wolves did not feature a raid, but instead featured the not terribly thrilling Prison of Elders. Bungie's response to a firefight horde mode with waves of enemies to fight against landed with a thud. The main PvE highlight was Skolas, the final boss of Prison of Elders, but getting to Skolas was more of a chore than it was actually fun. Skolas himself was a mess of a boss fight when first launched, but was eventually tuned to be a little more balanced, and as a result, way more fun of an encounter. The best 3-man encounter in the game, probably to this day. The rest of the Prison of Elders bosses were pretty hit or miss, with Bungie experimenting with some smaller mechanics that could hopefully influence the way future encounters were designed, though they weren't the level of difficulty that I was really looking for. However, larger strides were made with regards to storytelling, and this was the first time where it actually felt like we could follow along as to what was happening. Unfortunately, it didn't push any of the main storyline forward, instead just feeling like a side story in this still unexplained universe. In response to the struggles of gearing up in Vanilla and Dark Below Destiny, Bungie rolled out what could only be considered fan service in the form of Etheric Light, allowing players to easily level all Year 1 items to max level. This resulted in a very easy max light process. While this was very well received in the community, this was simply a band-aid fix until the new, better light system was rolled out in the next expansion. House of Wolves also launched Trials of Osiris, which overall has been generally well received as a mode, with the PvP meta itself influencing how good or bad Trials ends up being during any given time. Some have claimed that the only reason Destiny continues to exist on Twitch in the first place is because of streamers doing Trials over the weekend, and Trials did a lot to showcase upcoming streamers in the community. I failed to hop onto doing PvP content on my channel, and initial attempts at PvP content were not very popular, so to me, PvP content became an afterthought. It's only part of the reason why you probably won't hear me talk about PvP too much in this video. Long-term fans may remember a video I did on the PvP meta at this time simply called "This Meta Sucks." I am, to this day, still blamed by some people for the changes made to weapons featured in that video. That video, among a couple of others from the past, continue to influence the way I do opinion pieces today. Instead of actually giving my opinion on a lot of things, most of the time I try to make observations about what is happening and simply explain them without giving a side, unless I know the community is going to overwhelmingly be on my side. There's a very good reason that I rarely speak about PvP nowadays, and it's mainly because I'm not in that group of people who long for the days of Year 1 hand cannon cross-map kills. And because I am not, I have kept my mouth shut. It is not worth the hassle of trying to argue one way or the other. Instead, I just make my observations and try to give my opinion on why things are the way that they are, as opposed to saying what I like and don't like so that I can remain as neutral as possible. I didn't really take this advice to heart as much as I should have until a later series of videos that really made me realize what kind of game Destiny was, is, and probably will continue to be. I know that people often look back on Year 1 as the golden age of PvP, specifically the last 4 months of it, but overall, Year 1 was lackluster at best in most areas of the game. Somehow, the game lived on. My channel lived on. Somehow, it was still alive. Things had slowed down, sure, but I wasn't having any major issues at all besides video ideas. Maybe if I just hang on until the Taken King, things can really start to ramp up. This would be the second out of many times I and others would experience content droughts in terms of lack of video ideas for YouTube. E3 2015 features the Taken King, the big expansion that people were waiting for. This was Bungie's chance to try to fix a lot of the problems that the game had and to pull people back to the franchise. New subclasses, new raid, new destination, new exotics, swords, so much new stuff. But Year 1 items were nowhere to be found, with Bungie deciding to leave that stuff behind, and although it would all eventually return, this did upset a lot of people at the time. I thought it was definitely the right move. This is Bungie's chance to leave the bland Year 1 behind for new items and new opportunities. And thus, we enter Destiny's prime, the Taken King. Cutscenes, character development, infusion leveling system, exotic quests, new subclasses. The Taken King was almost everything I was hoping for. Improvements made to nearly every facet of the game, new collectibles, even the strikes impressed, sort of. Although almost anything would have been an improvement. Strikes with bosses that actually did unique stuff and had unique mechanics. Finally. And a raid in King's Fall that truly felt like an MMO raid with pretty heavy mechanics on almost every encounter. To this day, Golgoroth feels the most like an MMO boss to me. They really did a great job with it. And while math class placed 20th in the King's Fall World's First Race, we were among the first to get Touch of Malice thanks to a bugged Agonarch rune and a tip on Reddit. I remember silently working all night to have that Touch of Malice video uploaded in the morning, blindsiding other YouTubers by hours. To this day, my most viewed video on the channel. The new light system was leagues better than the old. It allowed players to progress, but not too quickly. Stern, but fair. It allowed players who kept playing to show off their playtime by hitting 320 light, the new cap, but you never needed 320 light for anything in the game. It was the first time where you didn't need max light to be effective, and the power gains between light levels weren't these giant leaps like in year 1. It was also the first time that it felt like any meaningful auxiliary progression existed in Destiny, although we still had a ways to go. PvP was shaken up as well, and although pulse rifles were dominant, a lot of people regard the Taken King launch meta to be one of the better ones we've had in the game. PvP would continue to have its issues over the next 2 years, with a lack of any sort of ranked or competitive system, and an ever-shifting meta that rarely pleased everyone, especially based on the first year of PvP. The Taken King did wonders for my channel, a lot of channels, giving me the 2 best months of viewership and growth that I have ever had and still have not been surpassed. It was clear that, at least for now, I could keep going without any issues. This was also the time that Bungie was not going to continue their expansion model and instead would introduce microtransactions into Destiny in order to fund the small live team that would make events for the game over the next year. These microtransactions always were a heated debate in the community, and while we haven't stepped into pay-to-win territory, it really felt like we were going to a couple of times. Fortunately, this didn't stop people from being excited for Destiny's next big reveal at PlayStation Experience 2015. This big reveal ended up being the Sparrow Racing League, a 3-week event as a wave of, "That's it?" washed over the community. Had it not been announced in such a grand way, I think public perception of the event would have been better. SRL was fun for a little while, but desire to play it dropped off rather quickly, despite it being something that the community had spoken about wanting on and off since launch. It was around this time as well that what I considered to be the very lackluster King's Fall challenge modes launched. This series of videos would be the first time that, 1, I realized that I actually needed to change the way I do opinion videos, and 2, I realized that Destiny was probably never going to be the game that I wanted it to be. Destiny was never going to be this truly hardcore experience, and I needed to realize that Bungie was not ever going to cater to that top 1% of people who play the game. Not now, probably not ever. A lesson that top PvP players to this day, I feel like still really haven't learned. It wasn't going to be my new World of Warcraft. This is a game that needed to be accessible to as many people as humanly possible, a philosophy that would only get stronger as we moved into the future. This is a game that needs to give as much stuff to as many people as possible while being fair and doesn't seek to be exclusionary in many ways. I saw the nasty comments people would leave in the comments for these challenge mode videos. How could anyone think that these were challenging or good at all? I didn't even know what the Warpreach challenge was when we did it the first time. It was so easy. Surely people will be on my side on this one. This is a slam dunk. How wrong I was. I needed a reality check and I got it, even if I still don't agree with some of the arguments that are made. This was another time that I learned that I can't just have my perspective in videos anymore. My perspective is not the one that many people have. Not many people are seeking a ball-crushingly hard PvE experience. I needed to have multiple viewpoints, not just my own anymore. Again, we would enter a slow period. Crimson Days came and went without much fanfare. To Bungie, it might seem like something like Crimson Days is a new PvP mode, new loot, new microtransaction, new quest line, etc. But to the community, it was a modification of a PvP mode that already existed and some ghost shells. It was clear that these micro events were not going to be anything like the expansions from year one, SRL too. Festival of the Lost and Crimson Days tried to fill the voids between bigger updates, but it didn't really feel like they did the best job of doing that. The channel was basically hanging on by a thread at this point, pre-April update 2016. I had mocked loot videos for too long in the past to start doing them, a thing I would regret doing considering how easy it is to make them. I was very stubborn when the game first launched. I thought that if videos weren't teaching you something, or if it didn't take me hours upon hours to do, that it was just pretty worthless content. Content is very subjective though. Something dumb to me was often viewed hundreds of thousands of times on other channels. Who was I to decide what was dumb and what wasn't? If it got watched and it wasn't disliked, it can't really be that dumb, can it? Well, maybe some things still can. I didn't want to put out fluff, but I didn't want to put out nothing either. I dabbled in The Division for a brief time, but that didn't last too long. I tried other games like Battleborn, Overwatch, Gmod. I tried a long-form series in Final Fantasy X. Anything to show that yes, hello, hi, I'm still here, I'm still making content, even if it's not Destiny. The fact that I was strictly an educational channel was finally starting to catch up to me, as interest in anything else was very low. I realized that when I first started out that the only way I was going to grow a channel was to be an educator, and I knew these days would come, these very slow days, and that they would suck. But man, did it suck. At this point, I think putting out nothing is better than putting out non-Destiny content, especially if I know it'll be multiple days in a row. I've realized now that it's a bad idea to post non-Destiny during the slow times because it makes people think you've given up on Destiny and viewership is already at its lowest. Perhaps trying to sprinkle in some non-Destiny content while things are hot would be a better idea. The April update would be what most consider to be the first significant update to Destiny since The Taken King. This update would revamp Prison of Elders with a scoring system, something that ended up being incredibly underutilized in the grand scheme of things, with a vendor weapon refresh, a new light level increase which also bumped up the drops in King's Fall, new weapons and armor, new strike, and revamped strikes, but most notably the 100% infusion rate increased from 60%, and more vault space. This was a decent update for the most part, but Prison of Elders continued to be this sort of boring experience. It felt like every time Bungie introduced something, they would stop just short of it being really nice to have for the long term. Oh, Prison of Elders scoring. That means leaderboards, maybe weekly and all time for best scores, and some rewards attached to that. Nope. None of that. No auxiliary progression yet again. I shouldn't have been surprised. Content was getting even more desperate at this point for a now fourth time, with me going as long as 9 days without a Destiny video, or in internet time, 1 billion years. Should I try to become a variety YouTuber? Should I just do nothing? I can't just make a Xur video and that's it for the week. This wasn't even a money concern, it was just a public image concern. I can't show that I've run out of ideas. Rise of Iron comes around and is essentially a lesser Taken King. There's nothing really wrong with it, but it wasn't Taken King. But it wasn't claiming to be Taken King either. Bungie never said it was going to be along the lines of it in terms of impact or size. The raid was, again, great, although it didn't have the gear struggle like other raids did, thanks to the ability to save engrams and hoard items, to the point where people were higher light level than the gear that was dropping in the raid itself. There were multiple quality of life improvements to the game, and it's probably the most casual friendly it has ever been. But again, Rise of Iron, like other updates, just felt like a side quest. Learning about the Iron Lords was cool, but we still haven't moved forward at all, this still being a problem today. Festival of the Lost 2016 was embarrassing, as the hype of the microtransaction-driven events came to an all-time low. The Dawning featured strike scoring and the return of SRL with a couple of new SRL maps. Strike scoring? That means weekly in the all-time leaderboard? No. Nope. Again, Bungie introduces something potentially very cool, only to not follow up. No leaderboards, no long-term anything. I've resorted to using third-party leaderboards and doing what I call try-hard strikes, going for high scores and fast times. It's actually pretty fun, as pathetic as it might sound, but you know what would be more fun? If it was actually in the game, Bungie. Try-hard strikes are fun to me because I actually get to try again in PvE. I get to take it somewhat seriously again. What I would consider the best free update to the game came in the form of Age of Triumph. New awesome looking gear, the old raids are back, vendors reset weekly, huge book to go complete, nothing not to love. Except if you're a PvPer who likes doing trials without using weapons that get around all the special ammo changes. Then for you, it's probably a nightmare that will continue until Destiny 2 launches. I wasn't expecting old raids returning to have the impact on my play experience that it did. I thought it was just going to be pretty bland and it would be over with in 2 or 3 weeks, but it ended up being really refreshing to have options. In fact, I'm even more of an advocate for bringing up old raids to current levels than ever before. Not that I wasn't in the past, I'm just more so now. Content struggles throughout the year continued for the 5th or 6th time, with this Rise of Iron Gap being the worst ever. I had my worst months since the launch of the game from January to March 2017, and even as I write this, in between May 1st and May 13th, 2017, we still have some rough times ahead. Sure, each month will have a major event in it. Destiny 2 gameplay reveal, then E3, then probably some sort of beta, and then more final news, and then the launch. But those in-between times are going to be rough. I tried streaming much more frequently, but I don't feel like that makes up for the lack of YouTube content, since you guys are used to me talking about certain things every so often. And as much as a schedule of content is good for other channels, I've never felt like having a strict schedule has been good for my channel besides Xur, which is essentially my loot video. It's been a very interesting journey. Everything says that Destiny, and by extension this channel, should not exist anymore. The poor initial reviews of Destiny, the frequent YouTube content gaps, nothing says this channel should exist. But somehow it does, along with Destiny itself, along with the hundreds of other content creators. Somehow, beyond all of the problems of Destiny over the course of 3 years, this and many others continue to exist among new ones that popped up and have grown. Throughout all of the issues, Destiny continues on. Problems have gotten fixed, some of them at least. It has one of the better gaming communities on the internet, generally speaking. But most of all, Destiny has potential. It always has, since the launch. Destiny 2 is the final chance to prove to the public that Destiny is worth their time. It is Bungie's chance to show the active community that they've learned from their mistakes. It's their time to fix the big problems that the game has had. The game's only gotten better, and I think we're only going to get better. I've had the opportunity to be at the forefront of 4 major Destiny events. Vault of Glass World 2nd, Crota's End World 3rd, among the first to get Touch of Malice, and what I think is the first Outbreak Prime. I wouldn't have any of this without the help of my clan putting in long hours, helping me with stuff that they quite frankly should have told me to go shove it. I wouldn't have any of this without the help of the community, covering 100,000 other angles that I'll miss because I'm just one guy. I've met people that I would otherwise never meet. I'm sure a lot of you could say the same thing because of Destiny. I look forward to Destiny 2 with a cautious optimism. Bungie does not have the benefit of the doubt anymore, not from you, not from me. I've told people, don't pre-order if you don't feel confident. I don't blame people for being skeptical. I'm skeptical. I run this channel. Bungie needs to earn this. I don't have any specific demands for Destiny 2 or for Bungie. I just want it to be good. If you enjoyed my retrospective, a positive rating would be appreciated. I know this kind of video might seem a little early, but for the most part, Destiny 1 is unlikely to receive any more significant updates, and so I thought this would be a good time to put out this video. Thank you for watching the 1000th video on the Datto Does Destiny channel. I'll see you next time. Most of all, Destiny has potential. It always has, since the launch. Destiny 2 is the final chance to prove to the public that Destiny is worth their time. It is Bungie's chance to show the active community that they've learned from their mistakes. It's their time to fix the big problems that the game has had. The game's only gotten better, and I think we're only going to get better. It is June 2017. I've just moved to Seattle in hopes of not being so alone and unhappy like I was experiencing in Los Angeles over the past 3 years. I had reached a breaking point and I wanted a change. And it was one of the best things I've ever done for myself. A new space, I got to live down the hall from one of my best friends in this industry, 15 minutes away from a couple of others. Life was getting a lot better, although I did have a moment where I broke down in the middle of a Target at 10 p.m. 2 days after moving while grocery shopping, wondering if I had done the right thing. But as luck would have it, the Destiny 2 reveal event is back in Los Angeles, where I would get my first impressions of Destiny 2 at the live event. Expectations were quite high given such a major sequel. And while opening cinematics and story beats were hyping me up, the feel of the game was left intact, which surprised me because I thought the sequel would try to innovate more. The Strike experience I got to play, the Inverted Spire, felt mostly the same as any other Strike experience. The story content felt like other story missions I've done before. Certain things got massive simplification, like the removal of intellect, discipline, and strength, the double primary weapon system change, and the entire pace of the game slowing way down. And I had a feeling, a not great feeling, but I was still optimistic because this was Destiny 2. Destiny 1 had been getting improvements, and at the end of year 3 of Destiny 1, things were in a pretty decent spot. It just needed to expand on what it had been building, and everything would be fine. The beta rolls around, and now that I get a second chance at the game for longer than one round of something, the issues start to appear. Ability and super regeneration is dramatically slower, which in retrospect seems like a dumb idea, but at the time, abilities were plaguing D1 PvP, and the cracks in PvP were really starting to show. In PvE though, these hits to super and ability regeneration on top of the double primary system were rough. A lot of people started to have second thoughts on Destiny 2 based on the beta. But, as people love to say, it's just a beta, and we didn't really get a taste at the full gameplay experience as far as the campaign and other systems go. The PC beta comes out and is met with very good feedback as far as performance goes, on top of some changes to super and ability regeneration rates before the launch of the game. Tons of high-profile streamers are trying out the game, and I'm excited at the prospect of seeing Destiny launch itself into a potential limelight on Twitch, as it would help my YouTube channel as well. Destiny 2 launches. And the launch period went moderately well, but things quickly took a turn after the honeymoon period was over, which took about a couple of weeks. The game didn't really feel like a sequel to Destiny 1 Year 3. It felt like a sequel to the launch of Destiny 1. The story had a lot more coherence compared to Destiny 1's launch, but what I thought was going to be a year-long story fight against Gaul was over within a few hours, with the final boss being a pushover if you had multiple people in your team. Lost sectors ended up being nothing more than big caves with enemies in them. Guided games, Bungie's sort of response to players wanting an LFG system in-game, had good intentions, but never saw the success I think they wanted to see from it, and to this day is still more or less the same compared to when it launched almost 3 years ago. All of the improvements Bungie had been making to Destiny 1 were seemingly gone in Destiny 2. Everything was way more simplified, but in a bad way. Random weapon rolls were gone in favor of static rolls, making duplicates worthless. armor stats were neutered. The grind portion of the game felt like it vanished. The Eververse store was packed. Exotics felt like they were turning into toys and their power was much lower. The endgame experience was decimated in favor of a much more casual experience. Even the prestige mode of the raid only offered cosmetic updates to gear. Everything was focused on cosmetics like shaders and armor geometry, with the bulk of the good stuff in the Eververse. The Eververse became the endgame. Fashion over function was the game. And the more active players were not happy, self-included. It was around this time that my content was also making a shift. During Destiny 1, I was much more focused on guides and education. But due to there being so many issues with Destiny 2, my content started to swing towards commentary and criticism pieces. People started to watch me more for my thoughts on current events and the state of the game pieces much more than they did in the past. I still wanted to focus on education and guides, but the Datto's Thoughts videos were pulling in quite a large amount of views. This was a major turning point for my channel as I shifted more towards macro scope level content, focusing on the big picture of the game. I was focusing on entire systems and sectors, and focusing less on weapon reviews or news or hyper-specific things. And this still holds true to this day. The PC release came and went without much fanfare. It was optimized and played really well, as it had been doing in beta and other events. I got to play with Tim the Tatman and Lazarus during the launch, and felt like the biggest jerk in the world playing with and telling them that the best way to level up in Destiny was to grind public events. A lot of people said that they were interested in trying out the game when it came to PC, which was encouraging to me from a business point of view. After all, more eyes on the game meant more people interested in playing, which meant more eyes on my videos. High-profile streamers checked out the game for what seemed like a couple of days before completely tuning out, ending any chance of Destiny breaking into the mainstream. Destiny still has not had that breakout moment. I'm fortunate enough to still be friends with Lazarus, even getting an invite to his wedding a little while ago. I continued with guides on raid challenges, nightfalls, Xur videos, exotics, until we hit Season 2, aka Curse of Osiris. Curse of Osiris did little to nothing to improve on the main issues of the game. Not that Bungie had that much time to respond to feedback, as the expansion was likely content complete already. This was the newest low in Destiny. They added a raid layer, a small raid essentially, but that was really about it for the highlights. Bungie continued with these miniature storylines that felt like they had nothing to do with anything, just random enemies and plot points so that casual players could feel like they completed a story. Curse of Osiris was just another batch of story content which was converted into strikes, something that the community hated at the time, but in current day is something that we could probably use a little bit more of due to how often we get new strikes. The Infinite Forest was hyped on a lot in the reveal stream by Bungie, and while I'm sure it was an impressive technical achievement, it amounted to nothing more than some randomly generated platforms that you would traverse to get to the thing that you actually had to go do. Bungie was also involved in the experience throttling issue that players had discovered, where Bungie was intentionally slowing down experience gains after a certain amount of experience was gained. Not to mention that the Eververse store got a massive refresh. The Dawning 2017 was another breaking point for a lot of people, with the Eververse dominating the event. I tried making a video discussing what might have happened with the shader situation that was happening at the time, but it was ultimately a video I regretted making after the fact. The channel and my morale had reached new lows. It seemed like Bungie wanted to take Destiny in a different direction, a much more casual direction. The RPG aspects of the game were completely gone. The information I provided just wasn't that important as far as guides went. And while controversy tends to bring views, I found myself just not caring about anything going on. I was getting bummed out at the state of the game and my apathy was growing. Xur videos had stopped, Nightfall videos had stopped, Trials of the Nine videos all stopped. All I did was have the same conversations over and over again. I was tired of it. And it was very clear that if things were going to change, we would have to wait until the next major expansion in the fall. Transitioning out of Destiny would have been a massive undertaking, one that I was not confident in making, but sure enough, I still tried some stuff anyway. The time between Curse of Osiris and Season 3, aka Warmind, was spent trying to dabble in variety content. I started to develop a lot of chemistry with the dream team of Mr. Fruit, Blue Westlow, and Robbie V, and the extended family. I introduced Trouble in Terrorist Town to the group, and it's been a staple in our game rotation ever since. I'm very, very thankful for this group and being able to become better friends with everyone. The videos I've gotten to make with them are some of the most fun I've had making content, even if those videos performed quite poorly because, well, it's not Destiny. I also made a full push into Monster Hunter World during this time when it came to serious content, producing about 9 to 10 videos, all of which did moderately well. One of them hit a whopping 2 million views, which is why you might have noticed a few videos with the title format that I used for that video in hopes of the YouTube algorithm blessing me with views. However, I ran out of goals in Monster Hunter, and the appeal of playing and making content on the game slowly wore off. I still frequently get questions about if I'll ever go back to making content on the game, and the answer is still a no. When all hope was seemingly lost, I received an email. The Destiny Community Summit, a gathering of dozens of content creators and non-creators alike. We would meet for 2 days at Bungie to discuss everything. Nothing was off limits. We talked about everything we felt needed change. Random weapon rolls coming back was probably one of the biggest things. Collectibles, guided games, lore, progression, changes to PvP. We asked, what happened? What happened to this game? And we had many good conversations that I believe ended up changing things in the game for the better. We also got our first taste of Gambit during this community summit, something that I thought would end up being one of the better things introduced into Destiny at the time. It was clear, though, that these problems weren't all going to be addressed in Warmind and that they would have to wait for the fall expansion. Warmind, aka Season 3, hits. The story campaign is another short-lived 2-hour excursion where we kill a hive worm god with some bullets and a fire stick. Things just have to be so rushed with these story beats because of how much time it can take to even make those missions. Warmind would seal the deal for this style of storytelling going forward as far as any non-major expansions went, although we didn't know that this would be the last time Bungie stuck to this format. But Warmind and Season 3 were definitely much better than Curse of Osiris and Season 2. Season 3 came with exotic weapon tuning, Crucible private matches, ranked Crucible, masterworking, heroic strikes came back, why did they leave in the first place, and more vault space. Escalation Protocol was the third time Bungie has tried for a public space activity, the first two being Court of Oryx and Archon's Forge. It was fine, but ran into matchmaking problems, a problem that is still around today with events in public spaces. Otherwise, Warmind felt like the typical Destiny $20 expansion experience. We still had loot problems. The Ikelos shotgun was the only item worth getting in the entire expansion. The power leveling system was broken because of the split in populations based on whether or not you owned the expansions. The faction rally event was pretty boring. The game wasn't saved with Warmind, but at least things were stable. September was still do or die. It was around this time that I also decided to make some improvements to my own life. I did a couple of videos with my friends, helping me get a makeover, new clothes, new haircut, new glasses, new everything, essentially. I was tired of looking like a schlub, where my wardrobe consisted of video game shirts that were 2 sizes too big and a single pair of jeans. I had more or less given up on finding a relationship given my work situation and how introverted I was, and still really am. I wanted to look better. I wanted to feel better, as YouTube was getting me down, and I was just exhausted. I'm still diving into the fashion world, the sneaker world mainly right now, to make up for the 27 years where I looked like an idiot. Whisper of the Worm, aka Black Spindle, aka Black Hammer, launched in what would be the first of, I guess technically 3 secret missions in Destiny 2, but the first of 2 of this particular style. The mission was kept a complete secret, something that's a rarity nowadays, with a difficult platforming section and an intense combat section. This mission was incredibly well received within the community and is one of those things that I really emphasizes what I love about Destiny. Feeling small in a big, big world. There was even a secret puzzle within the secret mission to solve. What more could you want? The rest of the summer consisted of discussing news bits here and there, the implementation of the final prestige raids we'd get for the time being, and the reveal of the September expansion, Forsaken. However, the only comparisons we had were the Taken King, which was great, and Rise of Iron, which was Diet Taken King. But Bungie came out swinging in their reveal. Random rolls are back. New destination, new story beats, new mode in Gambit, Triumph tab, Collections tab, new supers and subclass blocks, new masterwork system, the revamped weapon system that we have today, new raid in this place called the Dreaming City, and a revamped monetization model in the annual pass. The $20 expansions were gone. No more splitting the player base in a bunch of different ways. The annual pass would consist of 3 content drops during the year: Black Armory, Season of the Drifter, and Season of Opulence, as we'd come to know them. The annual pass gave you all 3, but you couldn't purchase seasons individually, so you had to pay up front for content that wouldn't be delivered for months down the road, which was a concern. Bungie didn't exactly have a ton of goodwill in the community at this time. Talk was pretty cheap, and Bungie had to deliver. Forsaken hits. And it's a hit. A much more refined story with a more serious tone, with Cade's death sort of being symbolic of a change in this tone, and because Nathan Fillion had a new TV show that he probably wanted to work on a bit more. The story wasn't too shabby, with my audience liking it more than the Destiny 2 launch campaign. The fact that we ended up with not 1, but 2 destinations was a massive surprise, with there being more to uncover after the main campaign was over, and the raid also being involved with the storyline. Although this particular storyline stopped after the raid concluded for the most part. The Dreaming City was fantastic with all of its secrets. The Last Wish raid continues to be my favorite raid experience that I've ever had, even if it ended in one of the most notable memes of the past 2 years within the community. Just remember, if you don't embrace the meme, it will destroy you. The weapon changes were great. Armor got perks again, weapons got random rolls, quality of life changes everywhere. There are still debates about which expansion was better, Taken King or Forsaken, which I think is a testament to the quality of Forsaken. Destiny was back in a big way. The game was saved, for now. The channel was also saved, again. I had the second highest single sub growth month ever during Forsaken, along with my second highest total views in a month in the past 3 years. I felt great at the time. I had plenty of videos to make, although things would eventually slow down to their usual guides, reviews, and thoughts on things. Raid challenge modes, however, during this time would slow down dramatically on the channel. The challenges I was able to do during the Crota Golden Age were simply not possible on other raid bosses due to there being a greater focus on mechanics and enrage timers. I grew tired of the formula. Let's only use this gun. Let's only use that gun. Not to mention that these challenges weren't even really that impressive anymore. In later raids, people would end up doing 2 or 3 man raids within days of the raids being completed while I was still working on guides. And it's kind of tough to compete when I was doing 6x Rat King kills on bosses compared to 3-man flawless runs. It just wasn't that exciting to do anymore. By the time I got around to trying these 2-man challenges, the appeal was no longer there from a viewership perspective. Sure, it's still going to improve my skill set and it's still something to do on Destiny, but I just don't really have the passion for it as much as I used to. I won't say that they're gone for good, but I haven't had much ambition to do them, just because I don't think they're very interesting anymore. There was one significant negative from Forsaken though: the removal of Trials of the Nine. Bungie had said that they wanted to revamp the mode and would re-release it when it was ready. This was a massive blow to PvP players, especially content creators who ran Trials carries on the weekends. We wouldn't see the return of Trials for several seasons. I'm guessing Trials was removed for multiple reasons, but one of those was probably security. DDoSing was rampant in later seasons on PC, and having trials be ravaged by that was probably not something Bungie wanted to have to fight. It was also around this time that I met Danielle, my girlfriend, through sheer luck and timing. Fun fact, while we originally met briefly at E3 that year, she says she felt the first flicker of interest in me because of this clip. It's about the titties on the inside. Yeah, dude. On the inside of the shirt. Ooh, I felt gross saying that. Oh, I felt gross. A few months later, Jez played matchmaker on accident by pulling us both into a raid group for content. We ended up having dinner in a group a couple of weeks later by sheer random chance and hit it off. I love her a lot.
I'm trying to kind of save for Tetris. Like, I'm not kind of... Like, I could build and
Right.
hit people and stuff, but I kind of want
What?
to build something that
Why
I
is
can
my mouth
kinda
big?
counterattack on.
Funny how she walked into my life as I had basically just given up on trying to find a relationship. She came with me to Sweden on my Anthem excursion less than 2 months after we started dating. She's been a beacon of support for me. And she's also given me the opportunity to look at games from a different perspective, something I've needed for a while now. My schedule could no longer just be 14 hours of gaming and editing every day, which definitely changed my perspective. She's hilarious and talented and attractive and a great script. There it is. Great script editor. Yep. You're laughing in the middle of it. I'm going to put that in the video. Forsaken comes and goes. It is a success. And now we move into a new era of mini expansions, aka seasons, starting with Season 5, Black Armory. These seasons would not be like the $20 expansions. There would be no new destination or story missions to dig through. They revolve around a central activity, which would be the gameplay loop for that season, and the storytelling would happen over time, spacing things out so that players had things to look forward to over the course of that season instead of just burning through all of it in a week. Sounds good in theory, but in practice, this model struggled to keep players excited. Although as a content creator, in practice, it was nice because I'd hopefully have something to cover every so often during the season. Black Armory launches in a not so great way. In order to even stand a chance in the Day 1 festivities, you had to go back and grind up power levels first, and even then the opening forge was brutal because the level was set much higher than people anticipated. Any momentum that Bungie might have had was immediately cut short because most people couldn't participate in the first day activity. Bungie was fast to nerf the power level required, but it still left a bad taste in people's mouths, even if Bungie said that these seasons were supposed to be an extension of the endgame. Scourge of the Past was a solid but relatively easy raid, all things considered. However, this was the first raid that launched with a major issue. You were able to infinitely revive people when normally you can't. Not the greatest thing to happen, but this is the worst thing that things would ever get with regards to raid launches, which gives Bungie a really solid track record. Seasonal weapons would boot up big time here, with Breakneck, Mountaintop, and Loaded Question being the offerings for Black Armory, a slightly long-term grind in order to get more powerful than average legendary weapons. This concept was well liked overall by the community, a non-time-gated grind for good items. Mountaintop would prove to be an amazing PvE weapon, and one of the most frustrating and brain-dead PvP guns in recent and long-term memory, something that still plagues the game to this day. Pinnacle weapons, in general, would prove to be a problem in the game as well, as most of these guns were by far the best options to use in most content in the game, leaving little room for non-pinnacle weapons to shine. A highlight of the season was the Niobe Labs puzzle event. Most would say that it ended up being a massive negative because it delayed the launch of a forge, but if it weren't for two iffy puzzle clues, Niobe Labs would have gone down as one of the best events in Destiny's history. A great puzzle event combined with a very intense combat event, something I'd still recommend people go try out. I was in the fortunate and unfortunate spot of closing on a house around the exact same time as this event launching, to the point where I delayed moving and had to buy a few extra days in my apartment to make sure I was able to stream on the first day of the puzzle. I was also in Sweden for the bulk of the puzzle solving for the emblems for Niobe Labs, so unfortunately I missed out on that as well. In the middle of all of this, it was announced that Bungie was going to be splitting from Activision and that Bungie would self-publish their game. Rather, Activision would be splitting from Bungie after Forsaken had not met sales expectations, or maybe other reasons in addition, or maybe excluding that. Regardless, this meant that Activision would no longer be on Bungie's side, and going with Activision would be the studios that were helping Bungie during this time, Vicarious Visions and High Moon Studios. The community rejoiced, as it was generally assumed that a lot of the problems in the game were the result of Activision's doing. However, we wouldn't see the results of this change for several months, as content was built or being built already. The start of Year 3 would signal that these changes are truly in effect. Overall, Season 5 wasn't too bad when we look back on the entire thing, but it was clear that people still wanted more of a cohesive story experience, and that these one-offs were not really cutting it. Before we pushed into Season of the Drifter, Anthem, a Destiny competitor, launched. Anthem is a game that I had been a part of for the previous year, going to events and feedback sessions to cover the game. Coming from BioWare, it seemed like it would be a slam dunk. E3 2018's gameplay demo felt pretty solid, although I wasn't really blown away. I went to Sweden to partake in another capture event, and a familiar feeling started to creep in. A Destiny 1 launch feeling. And my only thought was, not again. Not again. Another event in January before the launch would confirm my suspicions. This game was going to be in a rough spot when it launched. And sure enough, after 2 or 3 days and 3 videos, I had uninstalled the game and tossed it onto the pile of other games that I tried to cover that inevitably collapsed. The Kotaku article that followed the launch of the game really shined a big light on why the game launched the way that it did. But this was another huge hit to me mentally. I had spent a lot of time and resources preparing for this game to be potentially the next big thing, and having it collapse less than a week in was brutal. Anthem is still in its rebuilding process. Season of the Drifter launches and brings Reckoning and Gambit Prime, a remix of Gambit. The Day 1 experience was considerably better than Black Armory's. People could participate in the Day 1 festivities, and there were catch-up mechanics in place for those who fell behind. Unfortunately, Reckoning Tier 1 was a snooze fest on Day 1, and if you didn't like playing Gambit, you had almost nothing to do this season. This would be the first and last time, as of now, that Bungie makes a seasonal activity loop based on a specific game mode like Gambit. With no raid this season, endgame players were left wondering what they should do with their time. In the middle of Season of the Drifter, I took my first vacation since graduating college, going to Japan with some friends, although Danielle was unable to join me, which was really tough on both of us as she had just moved in a month prior. However, I still had a blast in Japan and still have days and days worth of footage that I recorded when I was there. I just never got a chance to edit any of the footage together, but maybe during the spring I'll try to make something. I would love to go back in the future. This was also the first time that I hadn't been vacationing somewhere for work purposes or with my parents, so being able to do things at my own pace really made me realize that, no, I don't hate traveling, but rather I hated having to squeeze in so many activities in a single day like I often had to do with my parents.
I mean, what are the odds?
Where did you buy that song?
I didn't buy it. It was just on the YouTube library.
That's why it's here now.
I can't believe it.
Do it.
Get to the drop.
It's the same
Just
song.
what are the odds?
I returned from Japan to the launch of the next secret mission, 0 Hour, Another glowing achievement in the world of secret missions that Bungie has done. Not only was there a secret mission, but there were multiple paths based on difficulty, a great exotic and Outbreak perfected, and catalyst, and another puzzle within the mission. The puzzle itself did have some problems, like the main item disappearing from inventories, and the reward for solving this 3-week puzzle being a massive, bulky ship that not a lot of people liked the look of. But 0 Hour was an overwhelming success and refreshing surprise in a season that focused on something that people were really growing tired of. Season of Opulence is far and away the best season of the year, featuring another raid, our third in less than a year, and the Menagerie. Math Class would yet again be placed into Destiny meme history by getting baited into thinking that we got World's First when we all got the raid exotic, when we actually got World's Second, losing by 6 minutes. This practice of dropping the exotic with World First ceased with the launch of the next raid, having the exotic be a quest instead of a random drop. I cried the night before, immediately after, and the night of this raid launch from the stress. I don't really enjoy the World First race anymore and haven't really enjoyed it for quite some time. It's still something I'll continue to participate in until the end of the franchise, but let's just say I'm mentally ready to be the Patrick Ewing, the Charles Barkley, the Steve Nash of Destiny. The Menagerie was Destiny's first 6-man match-made activity with a ton of player agency with regards to how players got their items. They could choose specific weapons to get, and even the masterwork. The encounters within the Menagerie were raid light, where you actually had to do things and not just solely kill enemies. A bug that enabled people to get 5 or 6 items per run was a huge catalyst in its success as well, although that would be fixed eventually. The Menagerie was peak seasonal content, to the point where I believe it may have ruined the game because it was so good in both rewards and gameplay. Anything less than this would potentially be viewed as a failure going into the future. It was also around this time that I made a video ranting about the state of PvP and PvE. In PvP, supers, power ammo, and scavenger perks were all out of control, and in PvE, damage buff stacking made a mockery of challenges that were supposed to be the most difficult in the game. All of these would end up getting tuned within a couple of months' time, with general player power getting nerfed across the board in nearly every category in the fall. That all sounds pretty brutal, but Bungie admitted to the fact that one of the only ways to challenge players in something like The Reckoning was to knock us off the map, or in the case of Heroic Menagerie, to one-shot us. Fortunately, things were not nerfed enough for us to feel like we were back in Destiny 2 Year 1. We rounded out the summer with a quick trip to Borderlands 3, but I never had planned on making videos on the game. Destiny's next expansion, Shadowkeep, would be delayed a couple of weeks, which allowed for some time for me to stream Borderlands. I played it really hard for about 3 to 4 days before ultimately stopping, as I had gotten everything I wanted to get out of the experience. I did not want any distractions as we went into Shadowkeep. I had the honor of being the host for the Shadowkeep reveal on Bungie's stream. Bungie asked me to write questions based on community concerns to ask during the stream. They did not ask me to ask any specific questions, nor did they ask me to hold back, although they never promised that they would be able to answer all of my questions. I really hope I did you guys proud on that one. Again, we found ourselves with a new seasonal model, but this time, seasonal content was all on Bungie. There were no other studios or publishers to help. Luke Smith had acknowledged that the team struggled to keep up the pace that they did with Season 5, 6, and 7, and that things were going to slow down content-wise, which made sense. Bungie had also heard the cries for a more cohesive story, yet again, and had plans to have each season's story flow into the next season. Seasons would also be a la carte. You could buy them individually or a bundle instead of being forced into the bundle. The game was also undergoing some technical issues, as the game had bloated into a massive download size, which potentially led to how seasonal content would work going into the future. Seasonal activities would be removed after that season was over. While this prevented the game from bloating, it also made it so players who stepped away from the game for a while only came back to one season's worth of content. Shadowkeep launches to lukewarm reception. It came with a new raid, dungeon, strikes, and a story campaign more reminiscent of what we were used to. However, the story, yet again, introduced an ambiguous villain, culminating in a final mission that stops right before it actually gets started, which still has not gone anywhere, although Season 10 events might finally trigger this storyline to start up again. The bulk of the story felt like just doing busy work for the most part, although those not familiar with the moon destination from Destiny 1 maybe didn't feel this way. Universal ornaments are introduced, allowing for the fashion game to stand out a little bit more. The armor system was revamped again, where mods became perks, and intellect, discipline, and strength were reintroduced into the game after a 2-year hiatus. Armor 2.0, as it was called, I thought was a success for the most part. The seasonal artifact, new to Shadowkeep, sought to bring seasonal metas, where you'd have to use certain guns in order to defeat new enemy types called champions. Season 8 also introduced the Season Pass, akin to a Battle Pass that you might find in other games. Surprisingly enough, Shadowkeep had better viewership than Forsaken did with regards to video views, but not subscribers. Shadowkeep was only the second time that I had hit over 10 million views in a single month. It was also around this time that I had finally hit 1 million subscribers after over 6 years of the channel being active. It was a long time coming, and there have been plenty of times where I thought I should just stop YouTube, times where I was burning out, but I knew once I started to climb to the 700 and 800 range that I was just not going to stop until I hit that 1 million. I had come way too close to stop. We celebrated during my stream with a recap of the history of this channel, sort of like what I'm doing now, but just way less formal. I never got around to editing it, which is why I never had a video talking about hitting 1 million subs. But hitting that 1 million subs also hit me mentally in a negative way. That was my pinnacle goal. 2 million seems impossible at current rates, and I didn't have something new to work towards. Ultimately, while Shadowkeep wasn't too bad, Season 8 itself wasn't exactly thrilling. Vex Offensive amounted to killing waves of enemies, then another wave of enemies, then another wave, with the final seasonal event, the Undying Mind, changing almost nothing about the activity. Season 8 kind of got a free pass though because it was included with Shadowkeep, and because Shadowkeep content really carried it. Season 9 is revealed and is a bit more well received than Season 8 overall. It featured a menagerie-light style seasonal activity in the Sundial, and a couple of pretty good story missions detailing the return of a beloved character in the Destiny universe, Saint 14. However, the threat of the Red Legion bored people as it was a storyline that felt wrapped up quite a long time ago. It was really starting to show that help from the other two studios was sorely missed. Bungie was probably now working with almost half their usual workforce compared to the previous year. They simply could not produce enough content in these seasons to satisfy the needs of the community in these drops. There was no raid or really any endgame focus in Season 9, and if Season 10 didn't have a raid, it didn't seem likely that we'd get one until Season 12. Season 9 also featured a new secret mission, but not in the style of 0 Hour or the Whisper mission. This was more about community puzzle solving, which came down to building a giant maze, mapping it out, and then running through the corridors of time in the proper sequence. This culminated in being given access to an exotic quest, Bastion, but the exotic quest mainly consisted of busy work, which put a sour note on the ending of this community puzzle. The puzzle was also designed in a way where it couldn't really be reasonably brute forced, meaning it took about 4 to 5 days of entering puzzle pieces by a select group of people into spreadsheets to get the answer. I think most people prefer the secret missions and not so much these types of puzzles, but I would take either one at this point. I was around for the very first day, which I thought was the most fun day, but already had a trip planned to PAX South and had to miss the rest of the puzzle solving process. I had a good time on my trip, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't upset about missing out on this, both from a business perspective and from a fun perspective. Impeccable timing, yet again, for me. Season 9 drifted into Season 10, which didn't really have a seasonal activity so much as it introduced a new public event. Based on the new but old threat of the Red Legion, again, they are attempting to crash the Almighty into a planet or something. Again, the Red Legion would fatigue people, although Rasputin became a much more central character in this season. As I write this, we are about 2 to 3 weeks away from the end of the season as we push into Season 11, so the ending is still currently unknown. People are also wondering where this story that started in Season 8 is even going. No older storylines have been concluded or wrapped up, no one knows where this one's going, and frustration again is starting to set in. The only redeeming factor of the season looks like it was Trials coming back, but even Trials couldn't keep people from getting frustrated as waves of cheaters and hackers piled in, ruining the experience for nearly all players. Grandmaster Nightfalls were also introduced, but landed with a thud as hardcore players were looking for repeatability in this and did not get it. Even a secret event mission in The Lie couldn't launch properly for Bungie, with most, if not all players being in a bugged state after having to complete hundreds of thousands of public events, which was initially millions, but was toned down by Bungie thanks to overwhelming community apathy. Community morale is at an all-time low, and if it's not, it rivals the Curse of Osiris days of Season 2. Season 10 has been the weakest of the seasons in Year 3, and Season 11 is a crapshoot. If the most Bungie could muster in Season 10 were public event, bounty, and lost sector grinding, what could they possibly do for Season 11? People were tired of grinding mundane goals for bounties, tired of constantly swapping their gear and weapons for bounties, tired of bounty grinding being the way to play the game. It had been like this in Season 9 as well, but Season 10 was truly the breaking point. The end game for most players ended up being hitting rank 100 on the Season Pass, which was best earned by, bounties. As I write this, it has been 10 days since my last Destiny video. Edit 11. Edit 12. Edit 13. This channel and my morale have reached new lows. And while controversy tends to bring views, I found myself just not caring about anything that was going on. I was just getting bummed out at the state of the game, and my apathy was growing. All I did was have the same conversations over and over again. I was tired of it. And it was very clear that if things were going to change, we'd have to wait until the next major expansion in the Hey, wait a minute! Here we are again, on the brink of collapse. Bungie finds themselves in yet another do-or-die situation with the 2020 fall expansion. History has repeated itself. Destiny 3 is likely nowhere in sight, as I don't think Bungie is capable of developing seasonal content on top of an expansion, on top of a full game release, on top of preparing for the launch of the new consoles. All they have is a fall expansion to bring themselves back, while in the middle of a global health crisis, while working with probably half the workforce they've been used to working with last year. Things are looking rough, but if Destiny is anything, it's resilient. It has stuck around through terrible times and bounced back multiple times, and I don't see why they can't make it a three-peat. Bungie has announced a round of changes coming for Year 4 of Destiny 2. Some good, like the Eververse getting some of their items reduced and put into the game, the lessening of bounties being such a core part of the game, and seasonal activities sticking around for a full year instead of 3 months. Some a little more contested, like weapon and armor retirement. But the time for talk, again, is over. We're listening isn't really cutting it anymore. Bungie's recent updates that went over big issues with the game are encouraging, at the very least from a communication standpoint. It feels like we only get this level of communication when things are at their worst, and I really hope that changes. I find myself thinking more and more about my post-YouTube and live stream life as I enter my 8th year of content production. This past year, I've been giving my mental health much more consideration than I ever have, giving myself the weekend off and engaging in more non-gaming hobbies and activities like cosplay, as much as it weirds people out, sneakers, the stock market, and getting angry at having to mow my lawn. The Datto of 3 years ago is much different to the Datto now. I have a lot more on my plate compared to the alone in an apartment days. I can't game and edit all day, but I don't want to game and edit all day anymore. I enjoy taking time away, which absolutely explains the reduced content output at times. Burnout creeps in much more often than ever. And I don't want to resent what I do because I know how many of you enjoy what I do. And let's be honest, I'm not really qualified to do much else right now. These past 3 years have had their ups and downs, but it's definitely been more up than down. I closed on a house, found a wonderful partner to share my life with, got to go on a couple of really nice trips, cemented my place in the community lore even more than previously, hit 1 million subscribers, started new hobbies, started a merch line, and somehow have mostly kept up with content. And yet again, I must thank all of you who have continued to stick around for the long haul. Or maybe you just started playing and you found my channel. Regardless, I thank you for changing my life in every way imaginable, even more than previously. I thank my clan and my friends for continuing to tolerate the stupid stuff that I'd like to do in-game. Fall 2020 marks uncharted territory. I'm anxious to see what Bungie has up their sleeve. But like I said 3 years ago, I don't have any specific desires for what's in store. I just want it to be good. If you've enjoyed my second retrospective, a positive rating is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. All right, where did we leave off here? Season 10. Okay. And we're on season... Oh boy. It is May 2020. We are wrapping up what would end up being a low point during the year and what would eventually become the third season slump going into the future. It is also one of the worst times for community morale, with Season 10 feeling like a dud compared to the mostly praised Season 9 before it, with perhaps the start of the COVID-19 pandemic contributing to this. I'm in the middle of writing the Season of the Worthy wrap-up video, where I am the most pessimistic I have been in a very long time. Not buying the hype, telling people to wait to play, and just being generally disappointed with the state of the game. The vibes were very down as we continued to plug away at these seemingly random one-off story beats that weren't actually leading us down any real path forward. It felt like we had zero direction whatsoever. Usually we think of the final season in an expansion cycle as being the best one because it usually is, but that foundation hadn't really been laid yet, with a sample size of 1 Season of Opulence being the only data point, although a rather strong one. Despite that though, Season 11 has what I think is a solid launch. The story finally feels like it's dealing with the bigger threats and the bigger plot points we've come to know. Rasputin is really scared of the pyramid ships. Eris is doing stuff on Io with the Tree of Silver Wings, remember that? And it feels like we're actually progressing down some kind of a path, as opposed to going off on these random tangents. While the seasonal activity is basically Gambit, the public event, people seem to like it way more than Season 10's public event activity. It's also at this time that Bungie experiments with Umbral Engrams, a system that gives more agency to players when it comes to getting loot, a system that will stick with us for a few seasons before we shift to something requiring less inventory management. With that, though, came this weird hybrid sunsetting system where after a certain amount of time, a weapon or armor piece would no longer be able to be infused. This was to try to get people to look for new items as older ones phased out, but we'll get to sunsetting later in the video. A free dungeon also dropped, Prophecy, the third dungeon in the game, which I thought was pretty good. Part of that was because I was very underleveled for the experience, which brought it more in line with what a contest mode type experience feels like today. Unfortunately, Season 11 is a bit of a blur for me, being one of the only seasons that I did not do any kind of a seasonal recap of as we were preparing for Beyond Light, and because I personally checked out pretty early on in the season. Part of that was because Beyond Light got delayed, resulting in the first of many extended seasons that we would come to know, with Season 11 lasting over 150 days. Part of that was also because in September of 2020, all of my energy from the pandemic had been exhausted, and I went into a pretty deep depressive state, which resulted in one Destiny video in 30 days. I don't think about quitting content creation very often, but this was the worst I had felt in an incredibly long time, and all I wanted to do was quit. It didn't matter how much money I was making or how many freedoms I had. I was just tired of it. And, well, you could see how that turned out. Fortunately, Among Us was blowing up and was so popular that even an Among Us video on my channel was able to break 100,000 views. So that kept me afloat and active for a little bit. A few months later, I would be approached by a couple of people at Bungie wondering what my interest was in working on Destiny. And I told them that if you had asked me that during that depressive episode that I was having, I probably would have said very interested. There's no guarantee that it would have gone anywhere, but there's also a chance that I wouldn't be speaking to you right now. The final 4 to 5 months of 2020 was also when my friend and fellow YouTuber Jez and his wife Amy moved in with us as they prepared to go back to Australia. The only thing that I regret about the whole experience is just not doing more content and more things with them. We didn't realize what we had until it was far too late, but pandemic-induced depression and curfews didn't really help. But I did get married to my now wife, Danielle, 2 years to the day after we declared we were dating. It was a small wedding. We booked a nice hotel room in Seattle. We got a bunch of people on a video call. We had our friend Riley officiate, got Jez and Amy as witnesses, and then we DoorDashed some sushi to the hotel room to celebrate. October 15th, 2020, almost 5 years now. It is still insane to me to think about the fact that we started dating almost immediately after Forsaken dropped, because Forsaken feels forever ago. I love you, buddy. Beyond Light launches in November and comes with big changes, but one sticks out in particular: the Destiny Content Vault, aka the DCV. Beyond Light had a big engine update, but Bungie was also dealing with tons of bugs and issues from older content that wasn't really getting played anymore, in addition to a bloating file size for the game. As a result, Bungie would slowly rotate out older content to replace it with newer things. The DCV to this day is still very hated, although it seems more like a necessary evil for the game rather than something Bungie actively wants to do. But the DCV also meant that it was going to be impossible for players to play all of the game's content going forward. At the time, this wasn't as big of a deal, but as the game continued on, this meant that newer players would never be able to play the game from the start in terms of the story experience, which has proven itself to be quite a valuable thing to have in your game. This is a pretty significant reason, although not the only one, as to why it feels difficult for Bungie to get new players to Destiny, on top of a very intimidating and underdeveloped new player experience. Beyond Light also featured the first new subclass in the franchise's history, Stasis. Stasis ended up torturing the Crucible for about a year straight, which felt really unfortunate because the few months before Beyond Light felt like the best PvP had felt in a very long time, if not downright ever. I think Fallout still has a command in his chat that features a clip of me being infuriated by Shatter Dive in PvP. PvE-wise, I couldn't really tell you how much of an impact Stasis had because it didn't feel that significant, but it was still fun to play around with. Season 12, on the other hand, was one of the worst reviewed seasons of the entirety of the franchise. It did kickstart Crow's rise to fame within the game, but pretty much everything else about the season was flat other than getting Hawkmoon and the mission that came with it. At the end of 2020, Jez and Amy moved out of my house, and Danielle and I were incredibly sad about it. We watched Jez videos for 2 hours that night to dull the pain. And this is also when we would get Brimstone, our blue nose pit. Danielle had been hounding me since she moved in to get a dog, because she had a dog in the past and really wanted one. I did not want one because growing up, I had a cat. I shouldn't even say that. A cat lived in my parents' house for 16 years. it never loved anyone or anything. So I saw no value in having a pet. To me, a pet was just another responsibility in a very long list of responsibilities that I was already not keeping up with. I did not want the dog, but Danielle did a lot of research to find the perfect dog for us. Just wants to sit on the couch all day and cuddle and do nothing. And we got the dog. And slowly but surely, I fell in love with the dog. And now I love my big baby doggy Brimstone. Season 13 entered us into what I thought was a golden age of seasonal content and storytelling, although it would start to wear thin as time went on. The jump in quality from 12 to 13 was significant. This is when the story of the seasons started to feel a lot better. One thing would lead into another, and it felt like it had some relevance to the main overall story, or it just felt like the stories being told were a lot better. It was the season of enemy density as well. Bungie re-released Devil's Lair, and it was really fun because there were a lot of enemies to kill when normally we are very, very starved for those kills. We got battlegrounds, we got presage, a good story. This was a very pleasant surprise and the start of some really consistently good seasonal content. Season 14, aka Splicer, also got very high grades from the community, although I wasn't as sold. The main seasonal activity, Override, was fine, although I did like one of the expunge missions very much. This season started the relationship with Misrax, which I think a lot of people enjoyed, a continuation of the unification of different enemy factions for what would end up happening story-wise over the next couple of years. Armor Transmog was introduced into the game here as well, where you could fully customize your character's look outside of exotics. There was a seasonal cap on how many transmog currencies you could get though, a cap that is still in place today, despite heavy complaints at the time. Vault of Glass returned, and the introduction of Master Mode raids, which proved to be a more contentious issue than I was anticipating, and I had many a video on Vault of Glass. Bungie also dramatically reduced the level grind season over season, dropping from 50 levels to just 10 in yet another big quality of life change. Around this time, I moved out of my house in the greater Seattle area to a different house also in the greater Seattle area. Danielle wanted to be a little bit closer to a certain part of town, so we packed it all up and moved right after I had air conditioning installed in that previous house. As of this video, I have now lived in Seattle for over 8 years, which is the second longest I have lived in one place in my entire life, the first being where I grew up back on the East Coast. I love Seattle, and if I can help it, I would love to stay, although some international plans are still technically on the table for the future. Season 15 was another extended 6-month season as The Witch Queen, the next expansion, was delayed to February. Fortunately, Bungie launched their 30th anniversary pack, which gave players a little bit more to go do to fill in the gap that we would have had, although with a somewhat hefty price tag. It brought back Gallarhorn, it gave us a wonderful first-time experience in the Grasp of Avarice dungeon, which was an ode to the loot cave from D1. It gave us Dares of Eternity, which was a ridiculous 9-themed game show-style 6-player activity hosted by Xur, and I thought it was a pretty solid update overall. Season 15 dealt with Mara and Savathun. Savathun has been locked away in a crystal, but has been controlling Osiris's body for a long time now. Savathun wants Mara to purge her worm, which, believe it or not, is not a euphemism, so we spend the season doing just that, and Savathun ends up escaping, leading us to the events of the Witch Queen. The activities in Season 15 were pretty enjoyable. We got 2 in Astral Alignment and Shattered Realm. I liked Astral Alignment a bit more than Season of the Splicers activity, and I thought was one of the best seasonal activities we've ever gotten, at least up until that point. Shattered Realm was more exploratory, looking for secrets and new pathways week over week. The weapons available were pretty not great, though. This was also the first time, pretty much ever, that fusion rifles in PvE were ever considered good, although that's mostly thanks to the seasonal artifact perk that boosted them up. This season also launched the timeline feature in-game. I was hyped as hell going into Season 15, and it delivered pretty well, capping off one of the best back-to-back-to-back season chains in the franchise. This is also when Vaultamania started up in a big way. I had been complaining a lot about other people begging and pleading for more vault space, and I started the vault auditing with fellow creator Fallout. This led to dozens of vault cleanings across the community, generating millions of views. It didn't happen on my channel, unfortunately, but I still had a lot of fun doing them. I had not anticipated the vault cleaning stuff to pop off nearly as much as it did. It was very surprising, but I'm very grateful to have been a part of it. The Witch Queen expansion finally shows up, and the campaign experience is a massive success. Bungie has finally introduced a hard mode version of the campaign called the Legendary Campaign, which aimed to give people a bit more of a challenging experience. Until Witch Queen, all campaigns, every single one, were stupidly easy from a gameplay perspective, which just kind of made the whole experience feel like you were on autopilot. It also undermined the intensity of the story beats. If our enemies were so pathetically easy to kill, it was hard for me to get immersed in the moment. To me, this was a massive negative with all Destiny campaigns. But Witch Queen? They nailed it. The Legendary Campaign difficulty was really fun, the reveals in the story were fun, and I went on record saying that, quote, "This was the most fun campaign that Bungie has ever put out, and I don't think it's even close," end quote, a take that I still think can hold up very well to this day. Bungie put that quote in their advertising campaign. The Hive have now gained light powers, Savathun has been spoiled on her true origins, we learn about the tippy top of the villain chain in The Witness, the main story is progressing, we are finally getting answers, we are finally developing some plot points, this is great. That being said, the rest of Witch Queen did feel a bit on the lighter side, although what didn't help was the fact that we just had 4 seasons worth of content removed from the game at the same time. This expansion cycle would also be the year we start getting the subclass 3.0 rollout, where the dated light subclasses would receive aspects and fragments like Stasis had, which greatly boosted build crafting potential. We started the year with Void. Weapon crafting also launched here, and it launched with a considerable amount of materials and currencies required in order to participate with the system. Now, I always thought of weapon crafting as more of a supplementary thing to the weapon grind experience versus having it just outright replace it. But as the year went on, Bungie would slowly chop out pretty much every unique currency related to the weapon crafting process, simplifying it considerably. Bungie would also introduce glaives, a melee/ranged weapon hybrid with the Witch Queen. It has been over 3 years since they were introduced, and despite countless buffs and quality of life changes, their adoption rate has still not been very high. Build crafting for them, though, has gotten a lot better, and some of the most powerful builds in the game right now use glaives, but it is a weapon that you need to have a little bit of confidence in using, otherwise it can be just very easy to run in and die. Season 16, launched with the Witch Queen, also deals with the Lucent Brood, aka the Hive with Light, where Keitel and the Vanguard team up to try to capture high-ranking officers and then read their minds with the Scions who can read their minds. We learn that they are harvesting Guardians. Well, okay, they're harvesting light to try to reclaim the Scarlet Keep and summon Savathun's throne world to it. Crow accidentally kills a Scion because he's trying to stop this whole reading their minds thing because it might be a war crime, and him and Saladin fight most of the season about this situation. Eventually, Saladin volunteers to join Keitel after she finds out about this incident instead of having Crow take the punishment. Season 16 also introduced more battlegrounds, which I thought were a pretty good addition to the Vanguard ops pool and would eventually be turned into new Grandmaster Nightfall strikes, although the community feedback on that has been pretty mixed. I thought that they were simply just the next evolution of the strike style experience, and honestly, if you just gave them some strike sounding name, I'm not sure people would be able to tell the difference. There is still a lot of debate about whether or not things like battlegrounds and future activities should be turned into GM Nightfalls, but I think they have been a great addition to that playlist. We also got Vox Obscura, a more combat-heavy exotic mission featuring some vehicle combat, and the first time we've been back to the original Mars in a very long time. Much like Witch Queen, this and a fair amount of this year's seasonal storytelling feels like we are on rails towards the finish line. And the rest of the year for me, content-wise, goes without too many incidents. But I had a moment in between season 15 and 16 where I kind of told myself to lock in. I hadn't been feeling super great about the YouTube grind, which is now a yearly ritual for me at this point, but I knew that at the very least, I was going to be sticking things out until the final expansion of this era. And if I was going to be around, I couldn't just slog through everything. I had to lock in and stay consistent. I basically signed a 3-year contract with a no trade clause in my own head. Make it to and through the final shape and reevaluate from there. Season 17, Season of the Haunted, brought back the Leviathan, which used to be a raid, now a patrol space. This episode heavily featured Callus and how he'll end up connecting to the Witness, in addition to Crow, Zavala, and Keitel coming face to face with some of their mental struggles. Keitel's issues with her father Gaul, Zavala and his wife and kid, and Crow with, well, what he used to be. The gameplay side, on the other hand, was a little different than usual, since we didn't get an activity so much as we got a chunk of a destination with some things to do in it. I wasn't the most thrilled with this space. I thought the novelty wore thin as someone who ran a lot of Leviathan already, but Bungie would learn from this experience in the future. Solar 3.0 also launched here, bringing in a new era of self-healing potential, one that is, I would say, mostly still intact to this day. Season 18, Season of Plunder, also had that third season slump, although I thought this season was much better than a lot of people ended up giving it credit for. The premise of the season felt a little out of the ordinary though, collecting pieces of artifacts revealed to be pieces of Nezarec before Aramis could collect them herself in service of the Witness. She's still very much trying to restore the dignity of her people, and she will do it by any means necessary. We also get some backstory on Misrax and an introduction to his daughter, Ido. The problem people had with the story here was that it did kind of feel like a filler episode on top of the continued week-over-week MacGuffin hunt. What wouldn't help is Nezarec would eventually come to life in the future in a way that did not please the community, nor myself. It felt like Nezarec should have been a bigger deal considering who he is. His name appeared on in-game items and in-game lore a lot, and his place in the lore was pretty high up, but he was otherwise unknown to the less invested player. The final subclass update came with this season as well, giving Arc Titans one of the best builds the game had ever seen up until that point, in addition to bolstering Arc Hunter's melee-centric playstyle, a build that to this day continues to be a top-tier setup. Gameplay-wise, I thought Catch Crash was a pretty good activity, although Expedition not as much. King's Fall also made its return to the game, and I had nothing but praise for how everything within was handled. I thought they did a great job restoring it. Divinity, a staple exotic in all raid groups, got nerfed this season, reducing the damage bonus that it provided on a target in half. I thought this nerf was completely justified, but it didn't matter how justified it was, people were still going to be mad that the game was going to get harder as a result. It didn't really get that much harder, and Divinity continues to be a very valued item in both raid and dungeon groups to this day. Otherwise, I was at a point where I just felt like I was going through the motions with the game. It was the same 3-month cadence of videos from me year in, year out. I think back to a 2021 State of Destiny video that I made where I say that innovation in Destiny can't be more Destiny, and yet that's what it still feels like. Season 19, on the other hand, whips us back into the main story. We got the Bray family in the mix, we got Rasputin, we got Mara, we got almost everyone. Rasputin the Warmind is revived to take control of the Warsat weapon system. There's drama with Clovis trying to become the new Warmind. Aramis is trying to help the Witness destroy the Traveler. The Traveler literally bails from Earth. I am locked back in as we take the story into the next expansion, Lightfall. Not only that, but every week felt like it had something substantial going on, so the momentum really kept up. Bungie took their first steps when it comes to power level adjustments this season, where you couldn't really over-level the seasonal activity, Heist Battlegrounds, which I thought was a great move. The activity was never so hard that you would get absolutely destroyed, but never so easy that you could just completely check out. And this system would get adopted to more parts of the game, in addition to not raising level caps nearly as often as they were, as Bungie sought to continue to address power level concerns that the community had. It was also this season that introduced one of the best quality of life changes in the franchise. Blue items no longer drop once you were a high enough level. A plague on postmasters everywhere. This was a godsend for inventory management, and I can't believe it's only been a couple of years since this update. 2022 had been the year of quality of life improvements for the game. System revamps, subclasses, weapon crafting, all of that. Another big thing coming was going to be the removal of Umbral engrams, moving to a more vendor-based reward system and removing seasonal currencies. And Bungie had acknowledged that the seasonal model was getting a little bit stale, even if the past 2 years were some of the most consistent years we've had in the franchise, if not the most consistent. It just takes a while to respond to that feedback though, as content needs to be built months in advance. So the earliest we would end up seeing any feedback would maybe be Season 22. Otherwise, the Witch Queen era of seasons felt very similar to the previous year, and my feedback has still generally been the same. More innovation, please. I was going into Lightfall pretty optimistic. The Witch Queen campaign was so good. Imagine Bungie getting another go at it. What other improvements could they make, if there were any to even make? They brought out all the characters for the previous season. The Witness is literally on our doorstep. New subclass coming out, the first in a couple of years. It's got a grapple move, dude. They're like, you can grapple the air and fling yourself around. What is there to not look forward to? And then Lightfall drops. I'm seeing tons of sponsored streams, more than I feel like I've ever seen in the past. Bungie is pushing Lightfall hard. Unfortunately, this was potentially one of the worst times to make such a push in modern Destiny history. I thought the campaign was very on par with Witch Queen as far as the legendary difficulty goes, the gameplay experience. But the giving and taking of the new Strand subclass during the campaign never let people find any kind of a rhythm with it. Not to mention that half of the campaign missions felt like it was based on trying to learn Strand and what it was actually about, and not with the actual plot. Like, dude, the Strand stuff should be happening in the background. Why is this taking priority? Why is this half the campaign? And then the actual plot, like, what the hell was even going on? What the hell is the radial mast? Why is any of this stuff actually important? This is not good. We had 2 new characters in Rohan and Nimbus. Rohan died so quickly into the experience and was featured so rarely that his death had basically no impact, and Nimbus felt incredibly immature for the situation at hand, which came off more annoying than charming. They did eventually mellow out in the post-campaign quests, but that was a bit late for people. And then the raid, Root of Nightmares. Beautiful environment, but these fights are just pathetic, man. At least there was like maybe some kind of a payout with Nezarec coming to life and seizing the plunder. But there were very few redeeming qualities about this raid on the gameplay side of things, where I unleashed a scathing review of this place, the most brutal feedback I have had for a raid ever. At least the raid exotic, Conditional Finality, was good, arguably the best raid exotic in years. There were a couple of good things though. Bungie revamped the champion stun system to now include subclass effects like Ignite, Jolt, Freeze to make fighting them way more enjoyable. They also introduced loadouts in-game so that you could swap weapons and armor without the use of a third-party tool and without needing to be in certain places within the game. Very, very convenient. But overall, this was not good. And what was especially awkward was that Bungie said they needed an expansion in between Witch Queen and Final Shape to do their story, which was this, which just left people even more confused. Hell, even the opening and closing cutscene to Lightfall just looked like they were split in half from what looked like originally one cutscene. Despite all this, Viewership on the channel during the first month, maybe 2 months of Lightfall was actually pretty good. Some of the higher numbers I've seen in a very long time. And I think the first couple of months of Lightfall, content-wise for me, was really strong. I thought I was dropping some really good videos, some of the best stuff I had made in a very long time. But the fall off hit insanely hard. Reviews for Lightfall were not good, sentiment was dropping every single day, and it would only get worse over time. Later in the year, layoffs would hit Bungie, with them announcing that sales were running 45% below projections for the year, thanks to lower than anticipated pre-order numbers for Final Shape and lower game engagement. Bungie had just been bought by Sony right before Witch Queen for $3.7 billion, and while they were purchased likely for more reasons than just owning the Destiny IP, this was not a good look for both Bungie and Sony. And to top it all off, Lance Reddick, aka the voice of Zavala, passed away a mere 2 weeks after the launch of Lightfall. He would be replaced by Keith David in the next expansion, but Bungie would not have Keith David re-record lines that were already in the game or already recorded. This was an incredibly devastating loss, not only for the Destiny community, but the greater film industry at large. Season 20, aka Season of Defiance, came with Lightfall and had the merit of being arguably the best season to launch with an expansion. So, that was nice. I thought the activities weren't too bad, but the story ended up killing off Amanda Holiday, a character that's been with us for a very long time, a non-Guardian character. Her and Crow had been forming a relationship over time, and this was pretty devastating for him. Although if you never listened to the radio messages of him talking about it, you wouldn't have even known that he cared that much. I wasn't the hugest fan of how she died, mainly because there felt like no point to risking non-Guardian lives in the way that they did. Most of the season consisted of pushing back the Shadow Legion Cabal and saving all the people that they have been capturing. We got Defiant Battlegrounds in Season 20, which I thought, again, were pretty solid. At the time, saying that some of the most fun combat rooms in the game were in this activity. Avalon, the exotic mission, also featured some really fun combat arenas, giving us Vexcalibur, which is now one of the best glaives in the game. Season 21 comes in, Season of the Deep. And I actually think this is a pretty decent season overall, giving praise to Deep Dive, Bungie's attempt at a roguelite mode, emphasis on light, although with some pretty good enemy density and encounters. The other activity, Salvage, was a 6-player activity, although I did not play that one nearly as much. Sloan is apparently alive, still on Titan, dealing with the Taken and speaking to a creature who would give more insight into the Witness by the end of the season. Bungie also introduced fishing here, which wasn't really required for much during the season. It was just a fun optional minigame experience, although it did get taken away when all of this content eventually left. Ghosts of the Deep was a fantastic first-time dungeon experience as well. The weapons of the season left a bit to be desired though. Bungie used the Taken color scheming this season for some of the weapons, and most, if not all of those weapons were pretty average. Season of the Deep also had a lot of networking issues with the game for about a 2 to 4 week period. Lots of extra maintenance required, servers were down much more often, things were just breaking left and right. This led to a divisive video of mine called "You Don't Know Anything About Game Engines." I made this video to try to combat some of the armchair developers and engineers out there claiming that Bungie should switch their game engine to something different, as if that would alleviate all of the problems that the game has. I know that the Destiny engine has its own limitations, but saying a swap like this would just fix all of it felt like a very ignorant take. This video got mostly good feedback though, which I owe in part to 3 anonymous non-Bungie developers that I got to speak with in order to get more insight on the topic of game engines. It was also around this time that I did 3 things. Number 1, I finally came to terms with the fact that I needed to take a sabbatical after the Final Shape expansion. Something needed to give in my life, and if there was a time to take a break, it was going to be after this expansion. But the Final Shape would end up getting delayed. So I never actually took this sabbatical, and I still have not rescheduled it. In fact, I did something that would end up being the opposite of a sabbatical, and that's taking on even more work. I get extreme anxiety over taking such long breaks because even though I know it's probably not true, I still think that if I disappeared for a couple of months, I would just be replaced, and my brain thinks that I'm only relevant because I continue to pump out videos with some amount of regularity. The second thing was taking on more sponsors. The initial reason was so that I could pay myself during the sabbatical that I was going to take, so that I would still have some money coming in during the months that I would be gone. I had always looked at sponsors in a very snobby way for most of my career, but sponsors and sponsored content had become so ubiquitous in everyday YouTube life that even after I did the sponsors I needed to do so I could pay myself, I continued to take them, although more on that in a few minutes. After getting an agent, I realized what I had been missing out on monetarily. I hated trying to negotiate with ad agencies and trying to figure out how much I should charge and how much I was actually worth. Getting an agent showed me what I'm actually worth to sponsors, and I cringe thinking back to some of the deals that I took and how little they ended up paying me, if they paid anything at all. I've been with my agent for a few years now, and it's been going fantastic. If you are some kind of a content creator yourself, you are probably worth more than you think, and you should get an agent, commission be damned. In retrospect, I should have embraced sponsors way sooner because I gave up a very significant amount of money over the years, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that getting more money for one or two sponsors than an entire month's worth of YouTube ad revenue isn't appealing. I gave up 5-figure deals for Raid Shadow Legends back when they were just handing out money. In 2024, I made more with sponsored content and partnerships than I did the entirety of my YouTube ad revenue for the year. So either I'm getting some great deals or my YouTube ad revenue actually sucks. In fact, 2024 was my best year in terms of revenue ever, although that was bolstered by some other once-in-a-decade events, despite me plateauing on YouTube. I've seen very little growth over the past 3 years, to the point where I am not sure there is even much of a new audience to capture for Destiny as a creator. This has unfortunately made me a bit more complacent in my content creation life, but that complacency has slowly been getting replaced with video ideas that feel like I'm getting back to the reason I wanted to make a YouTube channel in the first place, although not necessarily about Destiny. The third thing was dropping Destiny 2 from nearly every single video title, embracing more modern YouTube titling, and getting a little more creative with my thumbnails. I can no longer just put Datto's thoughts in a video title and have the video get hundreds of thousands of views. YouTube was shifting dramatically away from the subscription feed and more to the home feed, and I needed to adapt, at least a little bit. I do think that this has resulted in some more memorable titles, and my thumbnail game has definitely improved, although how much that's resulted in more viewership is honestly anyone's guess. Okay, back to 2023. Wow, I can already hear my voice going. Season of the Witch was up next, and Eris had a fantastic performance in this episode, pretty much all around, which made this more fun than it maybe should have been. We tithed to Eris, giving her power so that she would eventually kill Savathun to siphon a bunch of her power as well. The seasonal activities were both not too bad, with Bungie experimenting with an endless mode option for Altars of Summoning, where you wouldn't have to leave the arena after you completed a round. And we also had Savathun's Spire, which I found enjoyable, but I don't think either activity was super top tier. Crota's End re-released here as well, bouncing back from a brutally simple Root of Nightmares and providing something much more in line for what hardcore raiders were expecting when it came to a raid race. Bungie also had the Imbaru Engine, a series of puzzles that started out pretty easy but then went into puzzle overdrive towards the end. This culminated in a giga puzzle that was very difficult to solve on your own, which I found very satisfying, although I didn't solve it exactly completely on my own. But here is where the layoffs mentioned earlier happen. Sentiment is at all-time lows. Again, we have to hear about leadership and management continuing to fail the employees, all stuff that I had been hearing for several years now. Final Shape gets delayed after it is reported that it's getting good, not great, feedback, so Bungie has 3 months to try to whip this thing into shape. These are the first layoffs that I think we've seen for Bungie since the franchise started. Season of the Wish, the final season in this format, was yet again another super extended season as the final shape was delayed, with it lasting just over 6 months. This season's story featured Riven, or summoning her spirit or something like that, as a last resort to get into the Traveler portal that opened up as a result of Lightfall. Week over week, we collected hidden Ahamkara eggs that she had stowed away, hidden in secret, while also learning of her partner, Taranis, who I keep wanting to call Tanaris after the World of Warcraft zone, who sacrificed himself in order to save the eggs in the first place. The Coil was introduced this season, which I thought was one of the best seasonal activities we've ever gotten. It featured some fun encounters, good enemy density, a good amount of loot, including a secret loot room if you got enough points, although the points mainly came from scattered jars in the arena and not really from fighting. What also helped were the weapons from this season. 3 of my top 5 from the year released during this season, so the loot chase was back on. Despite community morale being on the level of Curse of Osiris or Season of the Worthy, potentially even lower, Season of the Wish had some very good grades from the community in terms of a seasonal ranking versus all other seasons. And I think that was because we had issues with what was going to be happening in the future, not really with what we had been experiencing in-game at that moment. It was concerns about the layoffs. It was concerns about Bungie not being able to do enough to guide this story to a satisfying conclusion. At the end of the day, I thought the Lightfall era of seasons were some of the most novel seasons we've ever gotten and might be the best era of seasons in the franchise. It's just unfortunate that it came during a time where a lot of people had checked out of the game due to Lightfall's underwhelming experience and the overwhelmingly negative morale in the community. At the end of 2023, with the layoffs, the bad news, the lack of confidence, I secretly made a second channel called Hello Datto that would post only non-Destiny content. I did this for 2 reasons. Number 1, YouTube's algorithm. Over the years, YouTube has been pushing more and more people away from subscriber feeds and more towards the homepage in an attempt to keep people on the website as long as possible, feeding you endless video suggestions. And when a creator posts a video, if it's getting a lot of attention, YouTube will push it more on the homepage. If it doesn't, they won't post it as much. This is why there's been a massive uptick in comments like, "Oh, I didn't even know you posted that video." It's because barely anyone uses the subscription feed anymore. And non-Destiny content on the channel usually performed badly, which meant that not only would people not see the video even pop up, but it could hurt future videos' performance because YouTube might not push follow-up videos as aggressively to people's feeds if they hadn't watched a video from that channel in a little while. The second reason was the main reason though. I really thought that Final Shape was gonna bomb. Okay, maybe not bomb, but I thought it was going to be Lightfall-esque. I thought people would play it would be okay at best, and then people would disappear. And I really just wanted a backup plan for myself. I really thought that there was a good chance that my audience would completely collapse as a result of the Final Shape not getting to the level that I thought it needed to get to. Morale was incredibly low. There's bad news everywhere. It was hard to stay positive about what was happening. And at that point, I'd rather just make a new channel, form a new identity for myself, and start over versus trying to convert the Destiny channel into a variety channel while trying to work against the YouTube algorithm, which that's a losing battle. And the first 4 months of that channel went really well. There wasn't that much going on with Destiny at the time, so I had the time to invest into playing more variety stuff, coming up with higher concept video ideas, trying to challenge myself a bit more on the creative side. I worked with a couple of editors to try to have 2 to 3 videos going up per week. I put a lot of time, money, and effort into that channel when it first started, and it was going insanely well. Growth was great, views were solid, I was learning. I felt like a real content creator for the first time in years. And then something happened that caused me to abandon that channel for 4 months, which was both great and awful. Into the Light launched in April 2024. Into the Light was a last hurrah celebration before we went into the Final Shape, although it was probably also here because Bungie didn't want us having absolutely nothing while the expansion was delayed. But Into the Light was one of the best content drops that Bungie has ever done for this game. In my November 2023 layoffs video, I said that I thought it would be insane to expect much from Bungie in this time period due to the fixes they needed to do with Final Shape, on top of making new stuff to fill the gap. And I could not have been more wrong, leading me to believe that maybe things in game dev world can move a little bit faster than I've been led to believe, although this was a very special scenario. We got Onslaught, a new Horde mode, which the community had been requesting for a very long time. We had 12 fan-favorite weapons come back and get revamped with new perks, and the ability to get a rare cosmetic version of them, labeled as a holofoil weapon. We had Pantheon, a raid boss gauntlet mode that added a boss each week and increased the difficulty. We were getting news drops about Final Shape. I was busy during these 2 months. Bungie also announced the unsunsetting. Bungie was now going to allow all weapons from every era to be able to be brought up to max level again. Granted, we had power crept well past anything these old weapons were capable of, on top of nerfing the main problem children in the Recluse and Mountaintop. I dropped an apology video after multiple years of telling people to delete old, unusable garbage from their vaults. This event was such a massive morale boost to the community, and people were having a great time. I even uncanceled my annual trip to GCX, formerly Guardian Con, which started as a Destiny community meetup. I wasn't going to go, anticipating that things were going to be bad enough that instead of meeting fans, it was just going to be a 2-day eulogy for Destiny, and I just didn't want to be there for that. A big milestone for me happens here as well. I hired an editor, Vada. For the first time in 11 years, someone else would be helping me with making content. I am an insane control freak, or at least I used to be. I always wanted everything to be 100% how I would have done it. But I remember the first few videos I sent to Vada were basically like 90 to 95% of the way there when I first received them. With a little more experience, we could get that to 95, 99%, and now a lot of the time, basically 100%. Plus, Vada could add some extra flair and flourish to the videos, things that I typically didn't have extra time to spend on. It has been a great year having an editor. I pay him to be my full-time editor, and I pay my 2 main Twitch moderators a monthly stipend. So if you're wondering where a lot of that sponsor money has been going, well, now you know. I had struggled with the idea that having an editor meant that some of the Datto does part of the channel would diminish and that people would think less of me for not doing all of my own videos. But after that long and after wanting to make some life changes, I just needed to do something. If anything, I think people think more of me for making good life decisions, and I don't think the quality of the content has diminished in the slightest. If anything, having an editor has given me more time to work on the writing and the research parts or side projects versus having to then also edit them. After a great 2 months, the Final Shape arrives, and Bungie mostly sticks the landing. I had my gripes about the first half of the campaign, how slow it felt, but the second half feels like it kind of made up for it. Cade is back for one last hurrah. We have the old tower back, sorta, but not really, but sorta. Prismatic subclasses are obliterating everything in sight, and Salvation's Edge, the final raid of this era, absolutely destroys everybody, completely flipping the Root of Nightmare's raid easy narrative on its head, giving us the most brutal day 1 raid in the history of the game, a feat that I never thought would be topped over Last Wish. For one brief month, I was in the top 10 most subscribed Twitch channels. The Final Shape gets some good launch reviews, and it feels like things are stable for the first time in a really long time. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't going to be as bleak as I thought. And just when it felt like everything was going well, and just when I uncanceled my GCX trip, more layoffs. Way more brutal than last time. The Final Shape did well, but not well enough, it would seem. Many other Bungie projects are canceled, as it appears that they overextended on that front, spending too much on many other projects while their main moneymaker wasn't bringing in the cash like it used to. Marathon, Bungie's other game currently in development, was the only surviving project. Although one other project Bungie was working on did survive, it was just taken over by Sony, including some of the employees. The Destiny 2 game director, Joe Blackburn, had already left a few months back and passed the torch. The best 4-month spree of Destiny in a long time resulted in some of the worst layoffs of the year. And just like that, we were back to being worried. Bungie would discontinue the typical seasonal wording for their new releases, switching to episodes, although the differences between the two felt not as strong as Bungie felt like they led people to believe in their initial marketing. These episodes were not linked in story. Each episode could be completed in any order. This is because they were all summing up some plot points from different storylines in the game, wrapping things up before we moved to presumably a new story arc for the next however long it's going to be. Each episode dealt with an object called an echo, which all spawned after the witness was destroyed. Episode 1 dealt with the Vex, Failsafe, and Maya Sundaresh. Episode 2 dealt with the Crow and Fickrel storyline from way back in the day, and Episode 3 dealt with the Hive family trio of Savathun, Xivu, and Oryx. I know that at the time of release of this video, all of this stuff is very fresh, but I'm still going to give some detail in case people watch this in the far future. Episode 1's story dealt with Saint 14's crisis of faith of himself, realizing he's just a copy of a copy, is he even real, that kind of stuff, while Osiris tries to keep him together. At the same time, we were dealing with Maya Sundaresh, who had come and gone throughout the years, and her storyline attempting and failing to find the perfect version of her wife before Maya went a little crazy. Bungie did some cool things here. They gave a section of Nessus a complete geometry makeover, but it was only while you were within the episode ecosystem. It never actually changed out in the normal world. And we got to go into the core of Nessus, which did feature some cool set pieces, and I thought one of the new activities they made, Enigma Protocol, was a pretty neatly designed piece of content, although I'm not super confident in its replayability factor. But all of this still felt like seasons. It's just that it didn't feel like we needed to go collect 6 to 8 pieces of a MacGuffin week over week to keep us occupied. Around here is where Bungie hinted at what was come post episodes. Not Destiny 3, not that I was expecting it, but the removal of annual expansions as well, which we learned was going to be now in favor of 2 semi-annual releases, with the seasonal format as we knew it gone. On top of that, it seemed that no gameplay system in Destiny was safe. Bungie wanted to make some big changes to armor, weapons, how we interact with the game on a day-to-day basis. We'd have to wait a few months before any more information would be revealed though, but at least I could point to something for all the people who would eventually come ask me about if Bungie was still making Destiny content or if the final shape was the end. Episode 2 claimed the 3rd season slump title from before, with this, to me, being the weakest of the episodes. The plotline was based on Fickrel and Crow's relationship way back in Forsaken, content that is no longer playable in the game. Fickrel has the Echo. He's being bad, go stop him. Despite this, it felt like we spent more time dealing with the Ido, Aramis, and Misrax plotline. Misrax is infected with the Nezarec curse, and we spend a lot of time trying to rid him of this while enlisting Aramis's help. Fickrel and Crow, I think, have one interaction during most of the episode, and Crow low rolls a persuasion check, so that was kind of the end of that. We eventually gain the ability to purge the curse in combination with getting the Echo from Fickrel, and Aramis is chosen to receive its power, which she will use to try to restore her people flying off to Reese. Bungie said no to crafted weapons for this episode, wanting to restore some of the loot chase that we used to have, but didn't really offer enough loot for people to chase. The activities were fine. Onslaught also returned with some additions, but people were not as entertained because the loot wasn't nearly as good as it was with Into the Light, nor was it nearly as plentiful. This, on top of a more convoluted currency system, did not lead to a lot of engagement. Around this time, Destiny Rising was announced and made playable in the form of a closed alpha. Destiny Rising is a mobile game made by NetEase in collaboration with Bungie using the Destiny IP. It takes place in an alternate Destiny universe and has some new characters, and after putting a decent amount of time into the game, I actually thought it was kind of good. I was very surprised at how it still very much felt like Destiny, although it helps that a lot of Destiny assets were made available to NetEase. A closed beta just started up as I was recording this after months of silence. I am wondering how it'll all turn out. It is a gacha game, and I feel like if there's something the Destiny community probably hates, it's gacha games. But it's also not a game that is necessarily designed with current Destiny players in mind in the first place, so I guess we'll see how it goes. Episode 3 launches in February 2025, with the story concluding a couple of months later. Bungie breaks out the All-Stars. Savathun, Xivu, and Oryx are all on display, going through some difficult family times. The Echo awakens the memory of Oryx, and Oryx has to now deal with this new world he's been reintroduced to since dying. Things have changed significantly, and he's having difficulty coping. Meanwhile, Eris gains a throne world and still wants vengeance on all of them, so she interferes with Savathun as much as possible, who really doesn't like that. We trap Oryx in a prison in her throne world, but he eventually escapes, and then we destroy him once and for all. Bungie brings back the Dreadnought, a very well-liked destination from Destiny 1, and makes a lot of improvements to the patrol as an activity situation they did with Season of the Haunted and the Leviathan. There's more encounter spaces, more roguelike elements, no health regeneration, secrets and collectibles to go hunt down, and way more loot. Bungie learned some loot lessons from Episode 2, being so much more generous with loot this time around, although still uncraftable, and also having a more simplified currency system to operate. Right before Rite of the Nine, the year's Into the Light style pre-expansion event, they dropped a huge community chess-themed puzzle on us involving collecting thousands of images, which you could only get by solving a sequence of 27 chess puzzles with a limited number of pieces. This is the first time since Corridors of Time back in Season 9 that we've had a puzzle on this level. The Embaro engine of Season 22 was kinda close, but it didn't take a community-wide effort to then have to piece together all of these different things to get the rewards. Rite of the Nine, again, 2025's Into the Light style content drop, lands a bit softer than its predecessor. 3 dungeons, Spire of the Watcher, Prophecy, and Ghost of the Deep, have been slightly revamped with updated loot pools, and they've been made free for a couple of months. A new easy mode was introduced for people to get into this content for the first time, and a new hard mode was introduced, trying to mirror the contest mode that we get for the first day of a new dungeon or a raid. But it doesn't exactly have the same appeal as something like Into the Light, which is still one of the best updates we've ever gotten. The loot isn't as good, the activities aren't as replayable, so I haven't been as engaged as much as I thought I was going to be. Although that doesn't really bother me too much, as it leaves me more time to prepare for the Edge of Fate expansion. And finally, we get the reveal for what's to come. The Edge of Fate and Renegades will be our first 2 expansions, with expansions estimated to be slightly bigger than a Rise of Iron type experience. Each expansion will have a mid-season update for a total of 4 big patches during the year. Renegades is heavily inspired by Star Wars, which already has led to a lot of commentary on what it'll actually be like, but we only have a 10-second teaser to go on, so I'm not investing too much time myself. For the Edge of Fate, a new character has been introduced in Lodi, who looks like if you took almost every male Destiny content creator with brown hair and smashed them together. The main theme appears to be based around the Nine, a faction that's been in the game since the beginning of the franchise, but one that we haven't had a ton of interaction with. We're getting tons of system changes and updates, stuff that I'm sure we've discussed up until the release of this video. And as of May 31st, the day that I am finalizing this script, that's where we've landed after 12 years. The last 5 years have obviously had a lot of ups and downs for the community. We've experienced some of the highest highs since Forsaken, and experienced some pretty new lows as well. 5 years ago, I said that if Bungie was anything, they were resilient, but that We're Listening wasn't going to cut it anymore. And yet, sometimes I still feel like I can use that exact line over and over in my feedback. And in watching the 7-year retrospective that I made 5 years ago, I find that a lot of what I said about myself still applies to me. Burnout creeps in far more often. I'm trying to take more time away for myself. I can't and don't want to spend 12 hours a day every day gaming and making content. And 5 years later, I am indeed still not qualified to do that much else in terms of a career. Although agencies hit me up, I'm going to be a great consultant one day. When it comes to content creation for this game, I'm not gonna lie to you. I haven't really been enjoying it as much as I have in the past. That's mainly because I don't feel like I get to actually sit and enjoy the game anymore. Everything is merely an arms race to get the first batch of videos out. Everything is about consuming content as fast as humanly possible, or at least that's what it feels like anyway. I just feel like a content farm a lot of the time, and day to day, a lot of Destiny content creation is just kind of job-like now. And it's not that I'm not passionate about making sure my content is as good as it can be. It's that I'm just not as passionate about what is being made because of the constant push to just get the next video out to people as soon as possible. I don't get the time to be passionate. I just have to get it out the door. And all my creative energy is going towards non-Destiny projects because I've just been trying to spread my wings a little more over the past year, trying to continuously challenge myself as a creator, and that challenge for me has been outside of the Destiny space. I would say that there isn't that much challenge for me remaining in being a Destiny creator, which has made me feel stuck mentally, just going through the motions, and I don't want to feel like that 100% of the time. I have 2 10,000 word scripts for non-Destiny videos currently in the works. I just finished one that was 16,000 words, spending multiple months to complete them. I have a real passion for these other projects of mine that make me feel like an actual YouTuber for the first time in years. That same passion that initially brought me to doing Destiny coverage, that spark for making videos. That being said, maybe I just feel like this because as of me writing this, I have had a very relaxed April and May 2025, playing Blueprints, Expedition 33, Doom the Dark Ages, being out of town, and just generally being detached from Destiny since there hasn't been a whole lot to discuss while we've been in this end of expansion era purgatory. My mindset does flip-flop a lot depending on what I'm doing content-wise at any given moment. April and May, well, I've been pretty hands-off with Destiny because I told myself a couple of years ago that I wasn't going to stress myself out trying to come up with videos when there wasn't that much to discuss. And being in this purgatory between old and new eras of the game, I wasn't going to burn out right before the new stuff started because we have a lot to discuss. Viewership has been down to probably the worst it's ever been as of me writing this, so that's also having an effect on me, but that's also self-imposed. Like, I haven't had much stuff to get people excited about, so hopefully it'll bounce back with the new expansion news and its release, and you get it. But worst of all is I want the best of all worlds, staying active with Destiny content and streaming and my side projects, knowing that the only way to make that happen is by spending all of my time doing it. And as I get older, I'm 36 in September, I have been trying to set more limits on how much time I spend working in a day. I still work pretty much every day because you just gotta in this line of work, but I'm setting stricter hours for myself. As I mentioned earlier, I hired an editor last year to help me full-time, and that's been a huge boon to me to either multitask a bit more or it could just free up my night so I can spend my time the way that I want to spend it instead of being buried in more work. But I still value having a direct connection with this channel, still having my personal touch in most things that I do, so don't expect that to go anywhere. All that being said, even a lot of the Edge of Fate previews haven't really gotten me that jazzed up, although that's less to do with the game itself and what's been revealed, and more to do with the fact that it feels like this community will never, ever, ever be happy with this game. At this point, it doesn't feel like anyone will be happy, period. It's like people are actively trying to be as miserable as possible. Conversations always drifting negatively, every Destiny stream turning into a space to vent frustration instead of actually being excited for literally anything at all. Bungie trying to restore the loot chase to their loot game, being met with vitriol, every single thing scrutinized to within an inch of its life. It's gotten to the point where I don't even really try to argue my point of view anymore because I've just stopped caring about a lot of stuff as a result. I know I will never change anyone's opinion on anything anymore, but the same most often goes in the other direction as well. I'm never going to sit here and say that the game is perfect, but the expansion isn't even out yet, and people are acting as if it's going to be the worst thing to happen to the franchise ever. And dealing with that day after day, stream after stream, video after video is really not fun. It's exhausting. It is exhausting. I get no joy from that experience whatsoever. It gets to the point where I dread booting up Destiny on stream because I know the next 4 hours is just going to be a lot of complaining or people saying, why is bro still playing this game, and game is dead, and dude is a shill, and like whatever else. And it's not like I'm even posting rage bait to get views to go along with like community sentiment either, because that's just not how I really operate anymore. It just makes me want to distance myself, even if I still really love playing this game. So if it seems like I've been a bit less engaged than usual, it's because recently being engaged with this community has just made me really sad. And that does not make for passionate or good entertainment. My next big Destiny project is going to be an attempt to make some kind of a new / returning player guide that is comprehensive for this next era. I want new players to be able to search almost anything about this next era of the game and have a Datto video pop up to answer those questions. Probably a big undertaking, but I'm going to give it a shot. I've already started writing. 2025 for me has been the year of self-improvement, and I've actually been following through. I get up at 7 to 7:30 in the morning when I used to get up at 10:30. I'm working out again a few times a week. I'm on a new skincare routine. I got a better haircut. I willingly read a book for the first time in my life. Danielle has been getting into the motion capture world and has already gotten 3 opportunities to do paid motion capture, twice of which being with Bungie doing Destiny emotes. I think the first batch comes out in Renegades though, so hang on to your money for a little bit longer. It's also been a year where I've wanted to reach out of the bubble that I've been in, collaborating with creators outside of the Destiny space, and that's gone pretty well so far too. The last 5 years of my life have been pretty good to me. I got married, I've made new friends, but the one constant has always been content. Even though the channel isn't really growing anymore, it hasn't for a while now, I appreciate that I still have an audience that is willing to watch my videos and still cares about what I have to say about this game. I learned this lesson a long time ago. I'm staying focused on the people who are here, not the people who aren't. It's nice to grow, but I'm not really sure how much of a new audience is out there to really capture. So in the meantime, I will do what I can to make sure that I continue to entertain those of you who have stuck with me this entire time, or maybe you just subscribed and found my videos last week. I will always appreciate everything that you have given me in my life. I am so much more successful than I ever thought I would be by several magnitudes, and I will never be able to pay that back. Thank you for everything. Thank you for watching. I will see you next time. It is June 2025. Episode 3 Heresy, the best of the 3 post-Final Shape episodes, in my opinion, has just wrapped as we prepare for a new era of Destiny, starting with the Edge of Fate. A new storyline, new characters, and a big game revamp all await us. Unfortunately, Edge of Fate did not land as well as people might have hoped, and that's for a few reasons. For starters, those game revamps had a pretty mixed reception. Some were good, some not as good. One of the good ones was fixing the stat system. Previously, there were basically 1 or 2 sets of armor that you would use for basically everything in the game, so once you farmed for a couple of good armor sets, you never needed to care about armor drops ever again. Bungie's fix for this was changing up what stats provided what effects, making sure that every stat point affected your stats instead of just every block of 10, and then made them go up to 200 instead of 100. This made build crafting a bit more interesting, since if you wanted a really strong effect from one stat, that means weaknesses in other stats. Trade-offs had to be made. Something that bothered people, though, was that Bungie also made it so stats could only drop in certain ways by introducing stat packages. Stats could drop in 6 different formats only. For example, Brawler armor is where melee is the highest stat on the armor, followed by health being the second highest, and then a random third stat. This pigeonholed people into certain stat blocks that they might have not otherwise wanted. Bungie would go on to release 6 more stat packages a year later for a total of 12, which I think covers most of the bases that people would want. In retrospect, the stat packages were probably to avoid having people flood their vaults with too much armor and too many options to work with, potentially overwhelming people. That's also because armor got set bonuses for the first time, although most set bonuses were pretty tepid to start. They also introduced tiers of weapons and armor, tier 1 being the weakest and lowest statted, tier 5 being the best, which you would progress through as you leveled up. One of the bad ones, depending on who you ask, but most people would probably tell you that it's bad, was the introduction of the portal. Bungie's idea with the portal was to get people into an activity in Destiny a lot faster when first logging into the game. A big issue with newer or inexperienced players was seeing the director menu and just having no idea what to do in the game. The portal sought to bring everything together in a few menus to easily display what was available to play and what items it would give you. It also allowed you to fine-tune your difficulty. You could add or remove all kinds of positive and negative modifiers to play as you wanted to. More negative modifiers would increase your score, giving you higher level drops upon completion. Unfortunately, this system was designed for an audience that simply never showed up to the game, and instead just ended up alienating the audience that was already here. People enjoyed the director menu because it gave the game a sense of scale, something that the portal took away. Personally, I basically only ever interacted with a couple of director menus anyway, most of that time being spent in the GM Nightfall playlist, so I wasn't as bothered, but for a lot of people, this was a game breaker. Bungie also hit the reset button on power level, setting everyone back to 10, while also doing a massive number crunch on damage numbers to make things a bit easier to read. More of a neutral change. Bungie also changed how leveling would work. Every expansion, your level would reset back to the soft cap, which was 200, while you regrinded up to the hard cap over the course of the season, which was 550. This is something that I was interested in seeing executed since it's somewhat similar to how some ARPGs handle seasonal leveling, with the previous year of content not really emphasizing leveling that much at all though. This came as a shock to many people since the main audience of the game had grown very tired of leveling. I did want to give it a chance, but after a couple of months in the original leveling system and pace that they introduced with Edge of Fate, I was pretty much over it and I really did not want to re-level that much anymore. Bungie also introduced unstable cores, aka a seasonal currency that you used to level up gear past the soft cap that would expire at the end of a season. The issue with unstable cores was that if you played a lot of different characters or builds, you would need to use a ton of this material to level up, to the point where you would have to run activities to earn loot just to dismantle that loot to get the cores from the loot in order to level your gear. Bungie removed this currency somewhat quickly after release, although probably not soon enough for most. When it came to the actual campaign of Edge of Fate, it was much more hated than it was liked. Bungie messed around with the idea of a Metroidvania-style campaign, where you gain abilities that unlock new parts of the map or area or enable you to do new things. You could turn into a ball to roll around into new areas, you could manipulate platforms, there was a teleporter cannon, but none of this ended up coalescing into something that got people excited. My issue was that a lot of the puzzle solving wasn't necessarily trying to figure out how to combine all of these things into solving a puzzle, but rather that most of the time the puzzle was just finding the puzzle and then just doing it, since most of them were pretty simple. The puzzles and platforming didn't really get interesting until the very end for me, and for most people just never got interesting at all. Bungie also talked about how you could do this campaign in different orders and how some areas would be blocked until you got more powers. But what this ultimately ended up being was something where you could start your campaign in one of two places, and then your part 2 would be the place where you didn't start, and then you were railroaded from there, so that kind of fell flat as well. The story, on the other hand, was a bit more well received. The new saga that Bungie wanted to start revolved around the Nine, an entity in the game that's been around since the beginning, but not really explored too much outside of lore books. Edge of Fate starts with a message from the Nine, who we would eventually come to learn comes from 3, who is not alive anymore. The message is essentially warning us about the Nine and how we'll need to stop them, although a bit ambiguously. We find a new character in Lodi on this planet who we learn was brought here because of the Nine. We also learn that Ikora was brought here because of the Nine, and that her entire life has unfolded the way that it has because of the Nine. There's also a subplot happening within Edge of Fate with a faction of the Fallen, something that I don't think many people ended up caring that much about. Career-wise, I had gotten into playing with a bunch of VTubers over the past few months, and I thought it would be fun to try to dive into the VTubing experience for myself with a Destiny spin. I had my in-game Titan and Warlock commissioned, I got a mocap suit, and I literally played as my character from in-game once a week on my streams. Unfortunately, a combination of an inconsistent tech experience and a significant enough portion of my audience just not really liking it led me to shutting it down after a couple of months. One of the biggest problems with Edge of Fate was with how leveling worked at the start. Leveling was attached to the quality of loot that you got. The higher your level when you played an activity, the better the loot. Loot was only very loosely connected to how difficult something was, so people wanted to get to the bare minimum level needed to start getting tier 5 drops, since those were the best in the game. People quickly learned that the best way to level was to run the fastest solo ops mission, Caldera, just spamming it over and over for drops. Everything else was simply less efficient, and if there's one thing people really love to do in this game, it was finding ways to optimize the fun out of it. Bungie would eventually make changes to how much loot would drop from certain activities, but they ended up reducing loot from higher paying activities more than they did increase loot from lower paying activities, at first. This balance got tuned a bit more down the road though, although maybe too much in the opposite direction at the time. What also didn't help was the mid-season update, Ash and Iron. This update wasn't as significant as people were hoping for. It did launch with a new exotic mission, giving us Wolfsbane, a very powerful melee weapon, and it did bring back the Plague Lands from Rise of Iron, but only in the form of the Reclaim mission style, aka what you did on the Pale Heart. Truthfully, I couldn't tell you much else about this update because I had my spirit snapped in half and took yet another break from the game. Desert Perpetual was the raid of this year, and it was so brutal on day one that it was determined that over 70% of the day one clears for this raid were cheated. This was easily the most demanding raid we have ever had when it came to contest mode, and it's also one of the most mechanically dense raids we've ever gotten. But Bungie did something that they hadn't done in a really long time. They gave us a hard mode, a true hard mode called Epic Desert Perpetual. They introduced new mechanics to fights that were already there, and gave us one of the most creative and fun final bosses I think the game has ever seen. I was really impressed with the quality of Epic Desert Perpetual, but a lot of the community did not feel the way that I did. I talked about how much I enjoyed it, but a lot of people were just not having it. I tried to celebrate something that Bungie did right, or I felt that they did right, and I think I just looked at a bit too many negative comments, and I decided that I had just reached a mental breaking point. This moment would become the beginning of the end for me and my relationship with Destiny. The past 3 months had been pretty brutal. The feedback was really bad, there were constant conversations about player count, and all the mistakes that had been made with the new systems and the features and everything. While I knew that it was going to take a while for Bungie to iron out the kinks, others did not have as much patience. The past 3 months for me on my live streams were not enjoyable at all, as most of the conversation were the same 3 or 4 talking points over and over and over again. There was little to no entertainment value, and I had people who were previously regulars tell me that they just couldn't watch anymore because the viewing experience had degraded so much. My mood was affected so much. And mentally, I was checking out on the game as well, not only because of the rough start to Edge of Fate, but also because trying to entertain such an audience became a miserable task. I took another pretty significant break from the game until about mid-November when I started to prepare for the next expansion, Renegades. Renegades was a collaboration between Destiny and Lucasfilms, aka the people who make Star Wars. While the gameplay and story would still be Destiny focused, there were a lot of Star Wars influences on many aspects of the expansion. Enemies, the social space, armor, weapons, characters, you name it. And this went over about as well as you could expect 2 of the most miserable fandoms in media to take such a thing. As someone not very attached to Star Wars, I obviously saw a lot of the influences in the expansion, but it still felt pretty Destiny to me, and I mostly enjoyed the experience. Others despised it outright. Gameplay-wise, Bungie traded the Metroidvania elements of Edge of Fate for significantly more action-oriented gameplay with the Renegade abilities. These were special abilities that did a wide range of things, from dropping a healing and energy restoration pulse effect, to stasis turrets, to carpet bombing an entire area, to summoning multiple kinds of vehicles. This was much more well-received gameplay-wise, and I enjoyed the expansion's campaign more than Edge of Fate's. Bungie continued pumping out changes and quality life updates to the game at this time. They previously announced that they would not reset people's levels, which came as a huge relief. They also had been making tweaks to leveling and gearing in general, but in my mind, they kind of swung the pendulum a little too hard the other way, where now things might have been too generous on the leveling and gearing side, and as a result, Bungie made Tier 5 gear, what was supposed to be the absolute pinnacle of loot in the game, sort of into the new normal, as long as you were above a certain level, thus replicating the problem they sought to fix back in Edge of Fate. This didn't really bother people though. If anything, it just returned the status quo. I put in my time with Renegades and did my usual thing, but this was the most passionless I had ever felt about Destiny. I was burnt out on the game in a near unrecoverable way. I wasn't really playing for fun anymore. I was playing because it was expected of me. It was my job. I was creatively bankrupt. Most of my uploads felt more like notices to my audience saying, "Hey everyone, I'm not dead. I'm still here making videos. All right, see you next time." And that's about it. The passion just was gone. Where did it go? Well, in January 2026, I launched a new channel, Datto Does Deadlock. I have over 800 hours in this game so far, and I enjoyed playing to the point where I wanted to make a lot of content about the game. If you would have told 2016 Datto that the next game he'd be super passionate about was a MOBA, he would have called you a moron. But this is the first game since Destiny 1 that not only have I enjoyed the game to the point of addiction, but I've also enjoyed it to the point where I genuinely wanted to make content on it. Most other times in my career, I made content on other games because it felt expected of me, because that's what everyone else was doing. Deadlock, on the other hand, all I wanted to do was play and talk about the game. Unfortunately, one of the biggest patches the game had seen in a long time hit 3 days before a month-long trip to South Korea that I had planned with Danielle, and I ended up missing out on a lot of the hype of this patch. I'm not going to talk about the trip too much here, but I have plenty of vlog content on my side channel if you want to check that out. It was a great experience, though. It was during this Korea trip that Bungie announced that their mid-season update, slated for March, would be delayed 3 months to June. June is when the next expansion was supposed to drop. So this left people very confused as to what was going on. The game had not been doing great up until this point, with player counts continuing to drop, sentiment continuing to drop, so obviously a lot of people were kind of preparing for the worst. However, Bungie remained very radio silent for a while after this, and a while before it too, not really discussing a whole hell of a lot with the game. I returned in March, and for the next 2 months or so, I pretty much no-lifed Deadlock. I was doing 10-hour Deadlock streams like they were nothing, whereas on Destiny, I would hit 5 or 6 hours and want to tap out. For the first time in well over a year, I actually enjoyed live streaming again. I was making new friends on Deadlock, I was making content, I was climbing in rank. I had a bit of a bad streak in April, but I bounced back and now I'm high ascendant rank, or at least as of this script I am. I continued to collaborate with people outside the Destiny space like I had been doing for the past year. Yeah, numbers were down a bunch from where I'd used to be, but I was enjoying myself so much more than I had in such a long time, and my audience gave me that feedback too. Marathon also released at the beginning of March, and I pretty much kept my word from before the game's release. I had no interest in the game. I did one sponsored video and a couple of streams, and that was it for me. I don't plan on discussing Marathon in this video, nor do I plan to cover Marathon at any point. It is just not a genre of game that I am interested in. Eventually, I got Destiny back into rotation, playing with my friends once a week, just doing some raids, and that was fun. I like raiding. I like playing with my friends, so it was nice to get back to a place where I was enjoying myself again. But finally, in late May 2026, the announcement comes. Destiny's final update would be on June 9th. The game would receive some small fixes after the fact, but all Bungie and Sony would do after those patches was just keep the lights on. No more new Destiny 2 content. I thought there was a small chance that this would happen, but I also genuinely thought that they would have another year before they shut things down. And I had planned on quitting after that second year of expansions if things had not improved. I had a lot of people asking if I knew this was coming, and the answer was no. I had no idea. My communication with Bungie basically came to a complete stop after the Renegades pre-release event that I went to in November. I have a whole video on my reaction to this, so I'm not going to get too deep into it, but obviously that first day was very emotional. My whole adult life had basically been this game and making videos for it. But this was the moment I had been preparing for over the past 2 years. Opening up multiple non-Destiny channels, playing more non-Destiny games, making new non-Destiny friends, even though I genuinely thought, up until recently anyway, that I would be making Destiny content forever. So I've been taking the news a lot better than I think others have as a result of my near constant burnout on the game over the past 3 years. The June 9th update, the final update, ironically ended up being one of the best times to return to Destiny and play the game in the past year. The director menu returned, lots of things were revamped and rebalanced to accommodate for the game entering its final form. We got tons, 4 dozen new armor set bonuses to go grind for, and a lot of them are really good. Pantheon 2.0 featured revamped boss fights and returning fights from raids that were no longer in the game, a new exotic mission, the one that was likely for the mid-season update, and so much more. It is one of the greatest updates the game has ever seen, giving players dozens, if not hundreds of hours of things to go pursue. If you haven't played Destiny in a while, this is your signal to come back and give it one last go. The thought had crossed my mind many times over the past year to quit Destiny outright. But honestly, I knew that I was never going to because I was scared of making the wrong choice. I was scared of leaving the good thing that I had going for something else that might not work out, even though the good thing was not really fulfilling anymore. There's a part of me that is happy that I get to move on without having to make that choice. Now, is there still plenty to discuss with the game in its final form? Absolutely. I think there are months worth of content still to be made for those who wish to make it. Could I be one of those people? Sure. But I also know that in 6 to 12 months from now, I'd probably be moving on from Destiny anyway. I've done everything I want to accomplish on the game. I've made all the content that I want to make. I am not looking for more reasons to play Destiny. I'm just tired. And I think 1 year from now, I will appreciate that I pivoted to my new projects and hopefully made progress on them versus staying on Destiny purely for a paycheck. Which leads me to this announcement, in case you haven't already seen it. This is one of the last videos that I will make as Datto Does Destiny, and I plan on completely exiting the Destiny and Bungie ecosystem. Shortly after this video will be my Destiny retirement video with my final thoughts and more information about my future in the world of content creation. I'll still be making videos, doing streams, but it just won't be here anymore. You may see some other videos pop up from me down the road on this channel, but most of it will likely be archival footage from old hard drives with minimal to no editing. I would like to post an update video once a year though, just to check in, but we'll see if I end up doing that. I plan on taking a short break after I'm done here, and then the rest of 2026 will be a soft sabbatical for myself. I'll still be streaming, I'll still be making videos, but I'm going to be using that time to figure out what my next path looks like. Deadlock will be the game that I call home going forward, although I don't ever expect to hit the same heights with Deadlock as I did with Destiny, given the massive differences in gameplay and the different circumstances that I find myself in content creation-wise. That is the history of Destiny and my career covering the game. It's never been a perfect game, and I certainly have not had a perfect career. I have plenty of regrets. I have plenty of things that I would have done different on another try. I know I've rubbed people the wrong way at times, but I hope people know that I tried to do as good of a job as I could. And I hope that in all the years that I've been doing content for this game, that I was able to boost your experience playing it in some way. I'll never get tired of hearing about how I helped people through their first raid, or how they love the videos that me, Jez, and Danielle did together, or anything like that. I know I'll be the Destiny guy forever, and that's a badge I will wear with a ton of honor. But I'm going to try to make some new things happen for myself, though. And I hope that you'll give me a chance to entertain you in a different way. But that's all for me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you for one more video.